Hello, everybody, and I'd like to say welcome and welcome back, as the case might be, to our online international conference dedicated to the new dynamics of performing arts, as captured in the very simple yet very eloquent expression of the title, This and That and That. We're talking about the transformations in the mentality of theater artists, in the practices of the stage. But at the same time, we're addressing the question of the new definition of theater criticism, a definition that is valid, that is contemporary, and that goes beyond the patterns of viewing and reviewing. We're out of our comfort zone and we're not reviewing as theater critics, but we need to explore new possibilities of understanding our role and our position in theater and in society at the same time. We are picking up from where we left off yesterday, but at the same time, we are creating new vibes for a new atmosphere with new people. I'm sure those of you who tuned in to watch the first session were amazed by the variety and the richness of the presentations. And I promise you that you won't be disappointed if you stay with us today, because we have speakers from literally all over the world, and we have so many perspectives to share. We'll be talking about what is happening right now and what we think might be happening in the near future with theater, with performing arts, with the experience of being there, of being together. And I insist upon this notion that is so close to my heart, being together, because I'd like to highlight the fact that despite all the sadness and even the despair that surrounds us today, there is this possibility that we should welcome all the time of being together while being apart. Is the paradox of online communication, but one that defines everything that is happening right now in this event. I would like to thank all the people who are involved in organizing this conference. I'd like to thank everybody who has expressed interest in participating, but above all, I'd like to thank you for being with us, for watching us, and for making this experience meaningful for everybody. I'd like to begin by introducing the first keynote speaker of today's session, somebody whom I've known for a very long time. In fact, I first met her when she was still a student at the National University of Film and Theatre in Bucharest, and I was amazed by the authenticity and the dignified approach to her craft that she already displayed. And ever since, I've been following her career, a career that took her from Bucharest to Paris, where she now works and lives, writing in French and working with many different French companies. Alexandra Bada, that is her name, as some of you know already, is really an artist that illustrates and captures the complexity of being this and that at the same time. Because she is a director, but she's also a playwright. She is a teacher and at the same time a producer. She has been invited by Avignon International Festival, the official program, more than once. And she has been championed by one of the world's most interesting, innovative, and provocative theater artists, Wajdi Mawad. It is with great pleasure that I'm introducing her presentation today, during which she will talk about herself, about her own work and interests. I have to express my slight concern about the fact that it is not a live presentation. However, it would have been impossible for Alexandra to be with us because she's involved in rehearsals at the National Conservatory of Theatre in Paris, and she simply could not reschedule them. And I think that's an indication of how serious she is about her commitments. However, she recorded this presentation in which she responded to this challenge. What does it mean to be an artist with multiple identities in the context of our world today? So Alexandra Bada from Paris, talking about herself and her work in English for the purpose of this conference.
Good evening. I'm Alexandra Bada. I'm a writer, director, and filmmaker. I could add also that I'm a set designer, even if I don't do settings for other directors. but in some of my production I did this. And anyway, when I'm working on the structure of the text and of the performance, I need to have this setting in my head, and also in the dialogue with the setting designer. I was educated I could say, a traditional theater school in Romania, in Bucharest, at the National University of Theatre and Cinematography from Bucharest. And I had education of directing. So in Romania, the system is very, very separated. We have classes for actors, classes for directors, set designers, theater critics, and so on. My preparation was 5 years, and when I graduated, I worked on contemporary drama, and I was telling to myself that I am only a director. When I arrived in France, now I'm living in France till 2003. So when I arrived in France, little by little, I felt the need to talk about topics that were mine topics relate at my intimacy, and also at the place where I was stoned in because of this migration process. So 3 years after coming in France, I was a little bit confused about my identity as European, because in Romania I was seen like a French, or not a French, but someone who is not belonging in Romania anymore, and at the Romanian theater. And in France I was also seen like a stranger, like someone coming from another school of theater and with another luggage, cultural luggage, and also theatrical luggage. So I had a period of several years where I was wondering myself where I am belonging and who I am. And at one moment I said to myself, maybe it's not important. I'm coming from a culture, and now I try to adapt in another culture. And maybe it's not important to be related to only one culture, but to be related at all the cultures that I crossed in my traveling experience, in my contacts with the other artists, or in my readings, in the film that I saw, and so on. So I wanted to write about this. I wanted to write about identity. I wanted to write about these things that block us in our inner development. And at the first of all, I didn't want to write. I wanted to find in a text these topics, but I didn't find the text. And I read a lot of theater, but I didn't find the text. Or sometimes I found something, but it wasn't in the structure and in the poetical languages that I was searching for. So at one moment I needed to build it myself, for myself, but also for myself as a human person, but also for myself as an artist and director. So I began to write my first plays, Mode d'Emploi, my first play, which was written in Romanian and in French also, but more in French than in Romanian. It was also in function of the main character. Sometimes the character talked with Romanian people, so she was expressing herself in Romanian. And then in some other scenes she was meeting French, so it was natural for me to write in French. What was important in this play, it was also to enter in the inner monologue, in her head, in her interiority. And here it was also a problem of language. Sometimes it came in French, sometimes in Romanian, and so on. So I began to write, and when I wrote 3-4 plays, and then I discovered that it was important for me to do this more than to direct. So now I think that one definition that I don't like to put definitions of me and on my work, but one of the definition, it would be that I'm more a writer who can write novels. Now I published my second novel, who can write films and who can write theater. For me, these 3 types of writing are very different, because when I'm writing novels, it's very, very simple. I'm free, and it's the supreme freedom for me writing novels. And I don't feel the same responsibility, because when we open a book, we can, as a reader, we can very quickly let it on the table if we don't like it. So a book doesn't have the influence that the theater can have on people. Because when you are going to a performance, you are stuck in a theater, in a place, in the dark, and you have to watch the stage for 2 or 3 hours. So for me, when I'm writing theater, I'm thinking about my responsibility. Why I invite people in this dark place? For what? What I have to tell them. And also, when I'm writing theater, I'm writing. The process is not stopped by the action of writing, even if the play will be published. But for me, the finality is the setting, is the stage. So when I'm writing a theater, I am more in what it will be on the stage, especially when I'm writing for me as a director, because sometimes I'm writing also for other directors. And when I'm writing for other directors, I'm more free also, because I try to consider that I have to stop the process in the middle somewhere, because from the middle to the end, it will be the job of the director. So I have to let him or her the freedom to construct something. So I'm not very, very focused on the space, on what will happen on the stage. I'm more relieved by all this. But when I'm writing for me, the setting designer, the setting has an important place. For instance, I won't write the same play if I have a setting with several spaces, or if I have a unique space, if I have a realistic space, or if I have an abstract landscape. Another thing that it's important for me when I'm a writer-director for theater is to build conflicts, and to include in the structure different point of view. I think that the theater is maybe one of the latest place for dialectical, for building a dialectic. And for me, it's very important to have several points of view, even if I will give somewhere my point of view, but I'm not doing a theater which is reivindicative, which has a thesis, which tries to convince the audience of something, of one point of view. I try to do a theater where I am presenting several points of view, somewhere in conflict, somewhere the both points of view can be okay, can be true, can be defended by someone somewhere. What it's important for me is to help or to encourage the audience to build his point of view. So writing theater for me and directing is also give the possibility to a diversity of points of view and a circulation of idea into a space. And the last field, when I'm working for the cinema, when I'm writing cinema, it's less in the words and more in images and more in the cut, also in the editing process. And there are of course common things on the structures, on the timing, but I'm also more in which is hidden under the words. Also, something very important for me in writing and also in directing is the documentation process. And for my plays, I'm spending a lot of time in the documentation process, reading philosophers or historians or doing interviews with people who lived or who was confronted to the topics that I'm working on. Sometimes this documentation process can give some atypical forms. For instance, I had a recent experience in France in La Comédie de Béthune. It's a theater in the north of France, a National Dramatic Center from France, where I'm associated artist. And it was a European project called Meet Your Neighbors. The idea of the project is to invite artists in a community, and to invite them to live in the middle of this community and to do a project with them. Not a theatrical project, but because there were very multidisciplinary artists. There were photographers, circus artists, writers, directors, and so on. So I invited with me sound designer, Rémi Biardon. I'm working with him in my productions in France. I invited him. So during 2 weeks, we were in what we called in France HLM. It's like a community of blocks, a neighborhood, a little neighborhood, where are people with economic problems. There were also migrants or people who are unemployed, and they have this right to have an apartment in a block of flats with a little rent. And these neighborhoods are led by the municipality of several towns. And sometimes they try to organize also a social life in these little neighborhoods. So we were there 2 weeks, and the topic was to meet people, to meet these neighbors, and to do interviews with them and to ask them what were their roots and their genealogical tree. Because in these neighborhoods there were a lot of people from different countries, or people who were born in France but with parents from other countries. An interesting community is the Polish communities, because there are people who, I don't know, they have grandparents who are Polish, and they came in France to work in the mines, and now the mines are not working anymore, so they are unemployed. So I spent 1 hour or 2 hours with every participant, and then we recorded the testimony with Rémi Biardon, and then we did like a sound design play or object. It was like an installation of sound installation, which was presented in a space like a gallery art from the theater, from the National Center Theater, and with I won't have time to develop this, but the idea is that sometimes the documentation process can give birth of another type of piece, more in the art contemporary field, like the sound design installation, but also I'm digging in this material as a source for my previous play. So for me, a theater production is not only a performance, it can be also a contemporary art piece, a performance, a documentary movie, or even a feature movie in another moment of the development. Maybe what's interesting also to point is that my statute is changing from France to Romania, because in Romania, when I'm working as a director and a writer in Romania, I am invited by the theaters to work or to write for the actors who are in their troops, in their teams, the permanent actors. So, for instance, now I'm writing a play for the actors from Sibiu. I can write a play for 10 actors or 12 actors. My last performance in Sibiu, I had 11 actors. Now I'm developing also right now a play for the National Theatre from Bucharest, which is the biggest troupe of actors in Romania. They are 70. So I can write a play for 30 actors if I want. When I'm in France, the situation is very different, because in France I'm also a producer. In France we have, as you know, I think we have only one troupe, Comédie Française, and the other theaters don't have actors inside. So every director is his own producer. We find the money for our production, and we have to find also the partners to present our work. So when I'm writing and working in France, I have this little problem, because I have to adapt my cast and the story, the number of my characters at my possibilities as a producer. So I won't write for 10 actors. I will write more for 3 or 4 or even for 1 actor. So this I thought that it was important also to point this difference between the two systems, and also this role that we can have now as artists, because we are not only writers, directors, set designers, we are also our own producers. So what is changing in the artistical field and the artistical process? The last thing that I will share with you is that now I'm working also for this last performance in Sibiu. I try to mix these two fields that are important for me, the theater and the film making. So I'm trying to imagine a performance where we'll have a part of film, a video which will be projected into the show, and a part of theater on the stage, and also try to see how the film can dialogue with the theater part, and how the theater can transform into the movie, and the movie can transform into the theater. How from the screen the actors can appear into the stage, or how from the stage they can disappear into the screen. And also I'm interested to explore another object. This will be a performance, but I will try also to invent and to create another object for media, for internet. So I won't film the play, this movie play, and put it on internet as some artists did it before. I will have a performance, a video performance, and a performance for the stage, and another form which will be something between a movie and a video art, because it won't be a classical movie, which will be for the online media. Thank you very much for your attention.
I would like to thank Alexandra for this very, very interesting insight into her own creative universe, and to appreciate the fact that she could speak about herself so clearly and so directly, although it is never easy for an actor, for a director, for a theater artist of any kind to do so. And I am pleased that we have become now, all of us, more familiar with her creative strategies and with the diversity of everything that she has been doing in France and in Romania. And I'm going to now introduce somebody who in turn will introduce our next keynote speaker. And I like to say that I really wanted her to be part of this event, not merely because, like him, she's also of Iranian descent, but because she understands from her own experience what it means to move from one country to another and to redefine oneself through these processes of becoming accustomed with a new cultural reality, with a new social context, with a new human set of circumstances. I'm talking about my friend Katayun Salmasi, who is now doing a PhD at University of Illinois, where she also teaches and where she's involved in the processes of international exchanges. She will be talking about somebody whom I'm sure most of you know already, Nasim Suleimanpour, who really has tried to redefine what the process of creating theater can mean in the context of our challenging global public sphere. So I throw this over to Katayun. I say welcome and a big, big thank you for staying up at a very, very difficult time, which is, I think, close to 4 a.m. in Illinois. So thank you very much, Katayun. And now you take over.
Thank you so much, Octavian. And hello, everybody. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening, everyone. I am delighted to join you in the very early morning from Illinois to introduce a countryman and a fellow expatriate who has built a following with his solo performances that inventively engage members of the audience on issues related to the other and to issues that face immigrants, whatever their nationality. Nasim Suleimanpour is an Iranian-born playwright, now living in Berlin, theater maker, and artistic director of his Berlin-based theater company. His plays have been translated in more than 30 languages and performed globally in more than 50 countries. Best known for his play White Rabbit, Red Rabbit, Nasim has received honors from the Dublin Fringe Festival and other prestigious organizations. White Rabbit, Red Rabbit enjoyed a 9-month run off-Broadway in New York with a starry rotating cast that included such celebrated actors as Whoopi Goldberg, Nathan Lane, Martin Short, Wayne Brady, F. Murray Abraham, and Cynthia Nixon. When Nasim Suleimanpour was permitted to travel in 2013, White Rabbit, Red Rabbit had already been performed 100 times in more than a dozen languages. Since that time, Suleimanpour has facilitated numerous workshops and panels around the world. His second play, Blind Hamlet, was commissioned by London-based actor touring company. It premiered in 2014 at The Lift, has toured in the UK, and was well received in Edinburgh, Bucharest, and Copenhagen. His third play, Blank, premiered in 2015 in Amsterdam, Utrecht, and London. Blank has been performed in nearly a dozen countries. His play Nasim was produced by the Bush Theatre in London and won a Fringe First Award, followed by productions in a dozen languages. The play also had a successful 5-month off-Broadway run, featuring well-known American actors working with him. Nasim, the play, received the 2019 Off-Broadway Alliance Award for Best Unique Theatrical Experience. Suleimanpur's recent play, Down by the Creek, was published by the New York Times Style magazine as part of its America 2024 series. He has been commissioned to write a new play for Audible, an audiobook platform, and will co-create a show for Boundless Theatre in London. If we were in a theater together, and God, how I look forward to being in a theater together sometime soon, I would ask you to welcome our keynote speaker with an enthusiastic round of applause. For now, perhaps you can click on your reaction buttons. Everyone, please welcome Nasim Suleimanpur.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Katayun, for staying awake or waking up early in the morning. Thanks, Octavia, and thanks everyone for being here. I'm gonna click on my stopwatch, try to be more German and punctual so that I just use 17 minutes of your time. I decided not to really bore you with what I did. Katayun very kindly gave you like some clues, and you can of course Google nowadays. I just want to, if you're interested, try to virtually take your hand and take you for a short walk to 5 locations in the past 10 years in life, which I think is related to the beautiful topic of this talk. So 2010, if I remember right, and I'd love to call this, being a writer, I love to name scenes, of course. Why theater or anything else? I have just graduated from University of Tehran in set design, something that I never did actually professionally, and I was facing the challenge of my professional life in theater. So I have to tell you that like a few years back, I've studied as an engineer, and then I quit because I was in love with theater. So I was like trying to go deep. You always find excuses not to work. That okay, what is theater? And if I was like working as an engineer, I could work on your electricity or design something for you. But what is the purpose of my job? I mean, what do I do as an artist? And there, I think I after like trying to take some notes, and that's how I think I became a writer. I came to the conclusion that to me, creating or writing has like 3 or 4 categories, if you may, clear ones. One is that something has happened in the past. Time passes, we come out of the pandemic. And when we're talking about like other people in the future, now looking at us in the past, there's things that are reported by scientists, politicians, of course, they talk a lot. Hopefully scientists saved our lives. Media, news, they record like 5 people died in this country, 10 people survived in that country. But there's things that are missed in the past. There is like a couple who are going to have like go on a first date, and they were like hoping if they could take each other's hand. And they didn't because of the pandemic. And this is missed in the news. No one talked about this. So here we need a novelist, we need a writer, we need a movie maker to go dig in the past and try to tell us what happened on that night. So this is one of the things that I realize an engineer cannot do, and maybe I'm interested to do. Secondly, I think is what is going to happen in the future. No, I mean, politicians talk about, okay, I keep saying like I'm vegan, I care about environment. What is going to happen in the future? How can I basically tell you a story in the future which relates to you? And you go, oh, if we go like this, there would be COVID, 2025, and maybe we do not manage to tackle that one. So that's jumping to the future. And I'm trying to tell you why I love the topic that Octavian picked for this and that, going to the past, going to the future. And then the other thing to me is basically going to a parallel war. Like most of, I think, art is like this. No, if I'm documenting something in the past, you could think of something that is right now happening in Tehran or in Islamabad. So this is like again something that I think an artist may want to explore. And in my head, this is what I realized at the time, that the whole effort is happening for an artist to travel in time, to go to the past and to the future and to a parallel world, only to have like a clear understanding of their presence, to know what is happening right here, right now. And that's why I think art is needed. So secondly, I want to take you to 2015. And if you may, I want to talk to you about the idea of how to get lost. In 2015, I was hanging out with this funny, charming Danish dramaturg in Berlin. This is when I moved to Berlin, of course. And he asked me a smart question. He told me, your dad is a novelist. How did you look at literature when you were young? And I described this mountain to him. And I told him I felt like I was like in this, in the outskirts of this mountain where I could see like all these legendary mountaineers are like climbing the mountains. And I was asking my dad or like his friends who were like known writers, Iranian writers, said, okay, who is this guy who's climbing so fast? And they might like, name like a writer who's still alive. What is that, Tom? Oh, this is William Shakespeare. You would never get there. He's up there. And then my friend asked me, but are you now climbing the mountain? Because some people are writing things about your place. And I was like, suddenly the paradigm was shifted. I never thought if I'm climbing the mountain. And we asked him to sit somewhere to drink some tea. I mean, we are in Iran, we're obsessed with tea. And while drinking the tea, in my head, I realized that I never climbed the mountain. I realized that I got lost. I realized that I am on top of like a lost hill, which no one is climbing. And I'm just enjoying exploring this form, which is like a non-rehearsed live performance for some audience. And every now and then, some institutions are kind, they come and pay a visit, and they give me some fund, which I use to invite some other artists to come and explore the other corners of the mountain, which I'm not capable to explore. So this is another this and that in my head. 2016. 2016, what do I call this one? The critics also have a very strong subconscious. Following the success of White Rabbit, Red Rabbit, I followed the format and I wrote a play which I called Blank. It was again a cold read, no rehearsals, we cast a new actor. The script is inside an envelope, no set, no nothing. That's why I never became a good set designer. And the actor is supposed to read the text in front of a live audience. Except in this case, we have lots of blanks, hundreds of blanks in the text. And the actor, with the help of the audience, is supposed to fill in those blanks. And basically, the play turns into a machine. Me going backwards as an artist should do to become a designer, only using words, how to fill in the blanks and basically create a story machine so that every night per show, the audience create a story which is not mine, it's just theirs, and they can sit there and they can share it and create it together. And I was like somehow again trapped in my home in Berlin. Most people are in Edinburgh. I'm an Iranian, still living on an Iranian passport. To get my visa sometimes is so expensive that it's not really worth to do this. I'm happy, everyone is happy. So when people say like now more than 10 people cannot go out and walk, sometimes I feel like I lived this story. I wouldn't mind, I can stay home, and live my life. Anyway, so I missed Edinburgh Fringe physically while my show was there. And this is where like the idea of critics, we have different levels. Now we have like scholars, what I always want. I was like, yeah, come in, spend like 2 years on what I did or others did. ask me smart questions that I never thought about it, find things that I lost in my own shows, and give me ideas to write other shows. I might help you to do something with your article. But sometimes when we talk about like reviews, again, like with critics, the story of stars and a financial life, a project, which an artist has to carry on their shoulder, this becomes really important. And as anyone who participated in a commercial scene of theater, West End, New York, or like even Edinburgh Fringe for emerging artists, it resonates with them. Anyway, regression to the mean, as scientists say, when you have a hit, the second play, as much as successful it can be, it would never become as successful as the first one. So it was a bit controversial. I pushed the borders like a bit further to invite a new writer, a performer for blank, who is going to cast a new audience member per show. As a result, the reviews were controversial. Some good reviews, some bad reviews. I was like reading them, and I was like trying to convince myself, look, we're all doing our jobs. No, the audience, they bought tickets, went to Edinburgh to watch the show. That's what they do. The producers are producing. The critics are like writing reviews, and you're home, you're writing your next play. You're a writer, you should be writing your next play. And then and there, a good friend of mine who was in Edinburgh sent me a review on Blank, which was written by a very young critic who was not Lynn Gardner, whom I adore, who was not, writing for the Stage or Observer, was not a positive or negative review. It was a review full of blanks. It was, I went to watch a show which was blank. It was written by Nasim blank. My first feelings about it was blank. I sat in blank and I saw blank, and that was the whole article. And I was sitting in my apartment and I was like, okay, what is happening here? So they are really smart. I mean, whether it's picked up or not, basically me being obsessed with the format of a show and putting it in a show which is apparently commercially not that successful is convincing a young critic to change the format of an article and write something which is not positive and negative, which is not really informative. And this is being published somewhere. 2017, the critics are very generous. I go back to Edinburgh, this time physically, with a show called Nasim. We call it Nasim the play because it would be confusion with my name when we speak about it. It is another hit, and it feels very good. It feels very good because this is like the first time that I'm physically there. I love the city. That I became a coward, that I got used to people telling me, wow, your show is good, because I felt like I was hurt when the old shows in between were not that of a success, and because financially I could rely on this new production. I get invited to sit with a lovely known Scottish critic who basically performed in blank, later I realized, in a beautiful cafe, drinking and talking. It was like a long chat. We were like having fun, sharing Danish. I think what we miss in 2020 as we're trapped and we're like doing Zoom. And he asked me, among like many personal questions, which I love when I speak about theater, he asked me if I read reviews. And I told him the last review that I read was like a review written by like a young British critic, which was full of blanks. And I told him the story, and I told him then I quit. Being here with a new show, I was like, and I'm performing now in this show, and I'm not a professional performer. I don't want to basically just keep checking my Twitter. And then we had like this funny back and forth talk. And I told him, look, I play basketball, you play football. I write, you write, but we still like for both athletes. A play of mine is 8,000 words, 4,000 to 8,000 words, depending on how many blanks do we have in the play. And to write this, sometimes it takes me 3 years. I don't consider myself smart, but I'm pretty sure I'm not stupid. And I did the math. I do like, if I work 8 hours per day, let's do the math. How many hours per word I'm putting in to write a play? So you come in, you see my show. If you run back home and if you sit and you don't sleep, and then the review comes out the day after, and then the review is at 500, words. How many hours did you spend on each word? Unless you are like, 20 times. I was trying to be funny, charming, challenging. I don't know, stupid maybe. And he's very friendly. We're friends. And I told him like, yeah, how many hours do you spend per word? So the value of those words are like, that high to me. And he just like paused and he said like, okay, smart, I understand you have a background of an engineer, as much as you try to say, I am not an engineer, this is how you work on this. And then he told me, okay, let's do the math with the money. How many words do we have in White Rabbit, Red Rabbit? How much money did you make out of this show? Just sitting, on your fat ass because people are putting it on and you're sitting home. And I'm very honest with money. I mean, you ask me anything, I tell you. And we went like through some of the files that I had, and we realized how much I earned. And I was like, oh, it's a lot of money for me. And I told him in silence, because he was like, he didn't tell me to ask me. I was like, okay, how much do they? I thought like, okay, so Tom Dibdin. I was like, how much do they pay you to come and write, for the stage? And then he gave me the numbers, and this was the moment that I realized that, oh my God, I should volunteer to write. I should be the one who's standing and who is the fact that like someone is smart enough to go back and waste the time. I would say waste in my story, to just like understand why Nasim Suleiman get obsessed with putting blanks in a play, no matter how much they are paid, because financially we all know it's not huge. Is adorable. 2019, 2020. I would love to call this one an exhausted man. I call it an exhausted man because in 2017, I put myself in Nasim the play, I put myself in the show. This is where like I decided to basically put the playwright on stage, just like taking notes and changing the script, because I keep like thinking of who is a playwright, who is a critic. If Tom Dibdin, who's a critic, is performing in blank, and I'm there to watch what he does, and then judge whether he's doing a good job doing my show, I become the critic, he becomes the writer, or like the performer. So we're all like changing roles. So I was like a performer in Nasim. And in 2017, I put myself in the show and I started touring. I toured for 2 years exclusively, did 500 shows. I remember like the first year I was like back home only like for 90 days, maybe 95 days. And I was exhausted and I couldn't stop because the shows get booked, and you have to be there. And suddenly theaters are closed. Suddenly someone stopped and someone told me, okay, you sit back on your fat ass and you try to think what is happening. And then I started to struggle to do Zoom talks. Bear with me one more minute. This is how I want to end the story. I'm sitting here with you guys. I'm listening to a recorded talk by this festival, virtual festival of Alexandria, in another country, in another time. So I want you to see how my brain works. This, as I'm watching her, this is my past. This is this in the past. And as you are now watching me, if it's live, we are on the same time zone, but our time zone is different from Alexandria. But if you are like listening to what I'm saying in the future, in 24 hours, I become your past. She becomes my past. So you are far future to her. So the job of an artist in my mind is to basically try to go back and forth and realize what is missed in this, that, and that. And I think a masterpiece comes in every now and then when, while doing this and not missing this, the artists manage to basically shift this line and go like this, and to explore what could have happened while going back in the time and going to the future. So I don't waste more of your time. It's 18 minutes, 28 seconds. Thank you very much. and have a very good, healthy day.
Thank you so much, Nasim. You all heard his story and how he's a very successful artist known in the world by now. But most of all, I am so grateful for his opinion and his viewpoint toward critics more than anything else that I've read in his interviews and about what he was explaining right now, that he's listening to critics and not like many of the artists. He appreciate their ideas even if they are negative and positive. I think that we all are critics here. I think that this is what artists need. Critics are not the enemy of the art, they are the friends. And Nasim is successful, I suppose, most of all because he's a good listener, mostly to critics. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Katayun. This is really an appropriate conclusion after a very insightful, interesting, and original keynote speech. And it was exactly every bit what I expected from Nasim, something that touches upon the theme of the conference, and yet it maintains that very, very personal flair. I like to thank him and Katayun for this very special moment that I'm sure will stay with us and reverberate in our minds and in our souls, because it is really a personal experience that was shared with us earlier on in this flexible time of this and that, of here and there, of the present and the past. And I'm going to borrow a phrase that Katayun introduced earlier on, the artist who listens to the critics, because it is so beautiful, it is so touching to me to realize that there are such artists indeed. And Jaroslav Fred, who's here with us again, is certainly one of them. And perhaps all great artists are prepared to engage in this dialogue with critics who are not their enemies, but who love them. And I'm also reminded of something that Suleiman once said in a conference I organized in Bucharest a few years ago, and how much I would have wanted him to be part of this conference, but unfortunately it's not possible. And he said, the artist should have the duty to listen to the critic, but the critic should always love the artist and be close to the artist. I think this is one of the most interesting and genuine definitions of what criticism is. And with this in mind, I'm going to be introducing the first speaker of today's session, who is a very, very dear friend, Tracy Sanders from South Africa. And having been there twice myself, the second time at her invitation, I can testify to the fact that artists in South Africa listen to her and that she loves them. She tries to protect them, she tries to nourish their talent and encourage their creativity in a social context that is more complicated than most of us can imagine. And honestly, I can think of very, very few colleagues of mine in the profession who are at once as loved and as respected as Tracy Sanders is. She is, to borrow another colleague's expression from one of the yesterday's sessions, she is a cultural facilitator and mediator. She mediates between the multiple realities of the South African society and culture. And I feel blessed to be able to introduce her personally in the context of this conference that simply, as far as I'm concerned, could not have happened without her. So I'm going to throw it over to my special friend, Tracy Sanders, who's talking to us today from Cape Town, South Africa.
Good afternoon, good morning, Octavian. I hope everyone can hear me clearly.
Indeed.
Good. Thank you so much for this invitation and those very, very kind words. They're highly appreciated. we've been benefited from the visit from Octavian and really enjoyed his visit and the wisdom that he shared with us. And like everyone, I've been very touched by the topic of this seminar and sharing, opinions of how, as cultural commentators and critics, we can contribute to the broader cultural and social landscape. At the moment, I think one of the things all of us are feeling so keenly is the specter of death and grief. Whenever an artist dies anywhere in the world, I think the grief ripples around the world in waves. With the age of social media and media that's accessible to everybody, everybody knows about every death. Just yesterday, Lars Norén, at the age of 76, a Swedish playwright, died. And ironically, earlier this year, his work Terminal 3 would have been performed at a festival in South Africa. That festival was cancelled, as many were around the world. His work was not performed. And also, if it does get performed either later this year or next year, he will not be alive to know that. Just last week, I emceed a memorial for one of our young dancers and choreographers, someone who's internationally respected, started a dance company that assisted dancers with disability to use the full extent of their bodies and express their creativity, the Unmute Dance Company. Themba Mbuli was dead at the age of 33. And I think with both of these deaths, much will be written about them, probably a lot more about Lars than about Themba. But I think one of the sad realities of COVID, and one of the things that we are going to be sorely missing in the months and years ahead, is the fact that a lot of these artists are dying at a very, very young age, long before they have created an established body of work, years before anybody would have thought of doing a retrospective of their work. When artists are dying at the tender age in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, and COVID in South Africa, like in many countries across the globe, is not discriminating in terms of age. So a lot of young artists are being taken, and because they haven't been able to even create work, most of them, the digital context in South Africa is very challenging, as there's many households who don't have access to either, some not even to electricity, but many not to high-speed internet, which one needs to facilitate the performance of an online performance. So I think it's an absolute tragedy that not only are we losing the artists, but we're losing an archive. And I think it's a role that, as a theatre critic myself, and as other theatre critics, cultural practitioners, writers, and documenters of the craft, that it's incumbent upon all of us that these artists don't just disappear, that they're not just a footnote in history. So when we look back on the disaster of the pandemic that was COVID-19, that artists' names do take their place in lights as they should have, and that we remember that it's the art that has kept us, speaking from my personal experience, but I know for many others that it's been art, theatre, music, dance, books, writing, poetry, paintings that have made the last 9-11 months of a lockdown bearable. And I think as COVID's going to be with us for a long time to come, we're still going to rely on the arts for the healing process, which is going to have to come after the pandemic is under control. We've all been vaccinated and we can return to stages and to audiences. But until such time, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to remember artists, both young and old, but especially those young who haven't had a chance to build up a significant catalogue of work, but who nonetheless were vibrant talents and who we will really, really miss in the industry. So that's just my thoughts about how we can contribute towards what's happening at the moment in time and play a role that's bigger, performing criticism as an almost an act of service over and above just an act of critique.
Tracy, thank you so much for sharing these feelings and these ideas with us. They really reflect your own stance and your own engagement in the context of the cultural scene of South Africa. And I hope I'm not breaking a confidence by telling everybody that you were totally heartbroken and you almost reconsidered your participation in the conference after the death of these two artists that meant so much to you, to the world of theatre, to all of us. And we know that when a writer, when a director dies, an entire universe dies with them. And if we know those people personally, we cannot avoid being affected at a deep human level And I know that you're devastated by these losses, and it is really, really important for me to say that I appreciate your presence in this conference. And I know that you have turned your camera off because you're probably weeping, and you have made all of us feel concerned and responsible for this mission that you have really beautifully defined in your presentation, the mission of criticism as testimony. Jaroslav Fred and I started a project that I feel privileged to be a part of, which is called Witness Action. And that really is the essence, the crux of being a spectator, witnessing and then testifying about the experience of witnessing. And that's what you have been doing throughout your entire career. So thank you very much, Tracy. I'll try to sort of switch between this register, which is in tune with what is happening in the world everywhere we turn, where death is part of life in a paradoxical way. And I'm going to be introducing the next speaker, who is a friend and a constant collaborator of mine. She is from Bucharest, from Romania, and I'm very, very proud of her because she is already an accomplished artistic director and producer, but also somebody who tries to encourage the new voices of theatre in Romania and beyond. I think she really is one of the youngest artistic directors of a state-owned theatre company in Romania and in Europe. Monica Simila graduated from the same university as myself, the National University of Film and Theatre in Bucharest, where Alexandra Bada graduated from. And she'll be talking to us today about a phenomenon that is often ignored, but decisively significant for the patterns of communication in the online medium, about criticism, about action, and about the role of influencers in the images of theatre that are projected through various online experiences. So I'm going to be now inviting Monica Simila to give her presentation in this conference.
Hello, and thank you very much for having me today. I'm honored to be a part of this conference. I'll be short. And I'll say that we live in a brand new world, a world somehow unrecognizable for our grandparents and even for our parents. The technological progress made in the last 20 years has changed dramatically the way we receive and we assimilate an information. The PR and the marketing tactics are different. The way we reach our audience is more direct, more facile, but meanwhile more complicated. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and perhaps TikTok are a must for any theater. More important than sites, blogs, and leaving behind miles away the newspapers. The written word is replaced by the image by the video, and the videos become short, brief, targeted, reaching its direct customer. It's all about an Insta reel, an Insta story, a funny tweet. What's the role of the written word? What's the value of a show review, and who got time to read it? Is it short? Is it funny? Who will see it in the end? In an era when almost anybody can become a vlogger by filming, editing, posting, and giving his 2 cents about any topic, what is the role of the theater critic? You will say that the expertise, and that is true. The background of the person opinionated is particularly important. But still, having you tagged in an influencer post will make you visible to thousands of people in a bit. Having a long, bad, or good review, not so much. Is the theater critic relevant today? Of course, and yes, in his field of expertise. Does it help a theater with his bad or good review? Arguable. The critic today cannot be a writer only. The time has changed, and now, more than ever, we should reimagine this job also. What is the benefit of an institution hiring a critic? Once again, his expertise. That is the only thing that will make him special. Knowing the field and understanding the process will make him the most desirable PR manager that you could wish for. But still, what you could do with a pen the other day, now you will need a camera to do it, and a Facebook ad, and hopefully a repost from an influencer. But is it enough? No. Your average critic will be your best historian because collecting and preserving pieces of history that are unfolding in front of his eyes, he will always have the record of the past. More than that, he or she will be the best advisor of an artistic director in making a repertory. He will understand the typology and psychology of the actors, and he will be in touch with the contemporary drama. Based on his studies, he will also have management skills that will make him a good producer for any show you need. Any theater has an organizational chart, a mission, smart objectives, and a marketing plan. It cares about the revenues, sales, and any other stuff. But the similarities with any other corporation or business ends here because the theater is about energy. It's about people working in a team, constantly improving and perfecting the final product, the show. It's about passion, calling, and the desire to be seen. Working with passion will push your limits and will make you to want to do more than one task. Being a critic hired in a theater, you will automatically do whatever you can for the final product to be seen by the audience in its best form. Being this, that, and that is actually back to square one, going back to its original form. We already know how to do it because Shakespeare and Molière taught us how to do it. Perhaps the theater has its own cyclicity and it will always be back to square one at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you. Indeed, theater always goes back to square one, and it's never the same, while staying the same in its fundamental aspects. And I'd like to thank you for introducing these dimensions that are very often regarded with scorn by critics and scholars, and yet they are part of the dynamics of talking about theater. How do we talk about theater? How do we promote awareness with regard to theater in a world where certain people are more prominent than others because they have the platforms to disseminate information? And I think this is a dilemma that we'll have to take more and more seriously in the near future, because the presence of genuine critical discourse is not necessarily threatened, but often enhanced by all these collateral aspects of online communication. And the great challenge that we all face as professionals in this field is to express ourselves, to communicate our views, while understanding that there is an entire world out there that is not necessarily prepared to listen to us. And I think this is a question that we should engage with more often. So thank you for addressing these issues, which I hope we'll revisit towards the end of today's session. I'd like now to introduce the chair of the next series of presentations, somebody whom I've known for a number of years. I'm not going to say how many because she's always young and even younger every time I see her. She is a scholar, a professor of theater studies, a critic, a globetrotter, and somebody who creates bridges between cultures, between Europe and Asia, between Bulgaria and China, between all sorts of different cultural landscapes. I'm referring to Kalina Stefanova, who is ready now to take over. So Kalina, you are now in charge.
I'm here, Octavian, but I cannot switch on my camera. I have no idea why it is so, but it
is such a pity because everybody, me particularly, wants to see you. But take your time, try to do it again, and if need be, log out and log in again.
Yes, I'm gonna log off because as you saw, it was working, and I'm gonna leave and switch on.
Please try to do that. It's fine. We'll be waiting for you. Luckily, the Zoom communication affords a certain degree of flexibility that we all benefit from. And this is one of those moments when we can take a deep breath and contemplate all these different interrogations that were provided by the presentation so far. And I'm going to invite you to maybe share some thoughts or express some personal ideas with regard to what has been already shared with us by Alexandra, by Nasim, by Tracy, by Monica. If there is anybody who wants to say something now, rather than save it for later.
Yes, so now we can see each other as I see.
Yes, Kalina is back, so we can continue exactly the way we planned.
Yeah, I'm very sorry for this technical problem, but that's the situation. It's very good that we have the internet to be together, but let's not become its permanent citizens and its slaves, because we see that nothing works always so well. I'm very happy to be with you together, and I would like to congratulate Octavian on having come up with this topic, which I find really very topically urgent. And it's I find it topically urgent in respect to theater criticism in the first place. To me, we have all the reasons to call the decade, which has just passed, a border decade, because in regard with theater criticism, because it started as if everything was as it used to be. It started on a very kind of stable note, and it finished in a nearly unrecognizable manner. And I don't mean only the pandemics. I mean everything which has happened throughout this decade led us to a place where we have not been before that. Sometimes I even think of the beginning of the decade and everything before that, like the world of yesterday, as the title of Stefan Zweig's book goes. And recently I did a research in American and British criticism of the last decade. And really, whereas in Eastern Europe, all of the critics, so usually most of the critics, let's say this, have been wearing a lot of hats, doing this and that, so that we could be also critics. This has not been the case so much in those two countries. What I see now, that there too, the situation in theater criticism is heading towards this direction. And throughout this decade, obviously so many media, newspapers, magazines, etc., have been dispensing from their critics, theater arts critics, etc. And whereas now critics have where to go, the internet, do they have the resources to sustain criticism there? Because you can write brilliantly, but you have to live on something. So what I found in this research is, found out in this research is that the question now has moved from the focus now is not on so much on quality, it's rather more on financing, how to find funding for continuing to do criticism. And even in Britain, where the situation is much better as usually in regard with theater criticism, even there, much fewer critics now can make a living on what they are doing. Less and less number of media are sustaining critics there. And 7 years ago, when some big newspapers dispensed from their critics in the UK, there was a huge debate. And then, already then, Michael Coveney said that maybe in the future, if somebody would consider doing theater criticism, they should consider doing it as a hobby. The decade finished on a very symbolic note with three very, very symbolic departures of Michael Billington getting retired after nearly half a century as a critic, of Ben Brantley in the States retiring as #1 critic of New York Times, and Eric Bentley passing away at over 100 years of age. So I think that now we are facing time when theater criticism profession is about to get off the list of professions and head into the territory of hobbies. Is that true? Are we gonna let this happen? And will this situation of when everybody can write about theater on the internet lead to a deprofessionalization of criticism as in terms of quality? I think these are very important questions, and that's why I'm very happy that there is such kind of a conference. And now we have three panelists who I think will be handling these questions, hopefully giving us some ideas how we can get out of this situation. The first of them is Zuzana Ulichanska from Slovakia. She has been wearing a lot of hats, and for 14 years she was writing theater criticism, and not only theater criticism, but covering arts on the whole. She is also a manager. She has been organizing for 20 years the main theater awards in Slovakia. And now she is a publicist at the Theater Institute in Bratislava. And on top of all this, she's also writing plays. Again, there is a diversity, both for stage and for radio. The topic of her presentation is this country is not for theater critics, which reminds me immediately of another symposium which we had some years ago in St. Petersburg, when somebody from Eastern Europe said, I live in Absurdistan. And I said, no, I live in Absurdistan. And somebody else said, no, I live in Absurdistan. So there was a quarrel. So maybe I think this topic, Zuzana, will lead to a quarrel if more countries are not countries for theater critics. So please take the floor.
Kalina, thank you very much for introducing me. I was recently asked by my general practitioner, what do I do for my living? And I really hesitated. I didn't know what to say, and it looked very unprofessional. So probably the best answer would be 30% of producer, 30% or marketing manager, social media specialist, publicist, translator, literary manager, office administrator. So the only period in my life when I was really sure what to fill in blank cells in some formulas, saying my profession, was the 12 years I worked for Slovak daily called SME. And that was evident. I was journalist that time. But since before that time and since that time, everything became to be more complicated. And the funny thing is that under this pandemic situation, and especially now is in Slovakia, is not academic or any just formal question. Because our Ministry of Culture, all together with the Slovak Arts Council, they want to make some research, and they want to have some real hard data about cultural business. And they are asking us to register in the two basic lists, and without registering, we will not be entitled to any kind of COVID relief aid or any kind of grants in future. And so by the end of this month, I will have to decide whether I'm an artist or supporting professional. The options are to be a dramatist, a poet, or journalist, but the theater critic is not definitely in the list of possible options. So I'm really thankful to Kalina that she mentioned this, that theater criticism is not in the list of professions anymore. So there's a one or two adaptations, one or two theater plays. Does it make you artist, or can we quote Oscar Wilde that criticism is an art? So what we should do really in facing this very very funny in a way lists that we are not reflecting in the present this and that situation of cultural business. And I I do not believe that the outcome of this research will give the ministry the right view and right picture of what is happening in this sphere. And I would like just to show you, to share my screen for two projects that will just support the idea that criticism is not anymore a way of it's not anything that can be defined. We started a project, Smart Theater for Teenagers, and we were not giving them any like formal limitations to how they should react to the productions they saw together with our tutors, our colleagues, theater critics online. And they have chosen poems. Sometimes they have chosen theater discussion, even TikTok, even videos. So it's obvious that the form of theater criticism is changing very rapidly. But it's not just about today and this day situation. If I share with you another picture, this is from the dictionary of theatre critics and publicists that has recently been put online by the Theatre Institute in Slovakia. And obviously, the Theatre Institute started with the founding fathers and first generation of critics that were, as you can see, born around 1900. And you can also see, even without the translation for Slovak, that there are quite a few carriers, quite a few lines under the name. It's translator, publicist, editor, theater literary critic, literary manager, director, theater amateurs, actor. So this was the situation in the last century, and this is a situation that is still happening now. I would like to give you even the membership of our Slovak Center of ICT is now made of. I can give you the example of the most prolific opera critic that is by profession dentist. We do have ex-builders of cranes. So we have secondary school teachers. So it's a wide range of professions. And none of these people are doing theater criticism as their profession. Why? I can give you a little bit of figures and very simple mathematics. Slovakia is a small country with 5 million inhabitants that we count roughly about 250 performances a year that are made by 23, 24 state and regional theaters and other independent companies. So even if I write myself personally the review on all of these 250 productions, I would not be able to become a very wealthy old woman because like honorarium per one article can range from 30 euros to 100 euros. So in comparison, a 20-minute visit of a repairman in your household can cost you same amount. And you all know that for a critic to see a show and review the show, this work can involve a 5-hour travel to some regional theater, plus hours of research, plus hours of writing. So basically, it cannot be more than a very noble hobby. Just really, you know, numbers are very obvious. In Slovakia, we can have roughly 25 reviews per month only, by 5 or 8 in monthly code, another 5 in our ICT portal monitoring of theater, and other 10 or 15 in other sources. So this business, the value, the market value of this business, and in consequence, the value of opinion, the value of insight, the value knowledge about theater in whole Slovakia is something like 2,000 or 3,000 euro per month in whole Slovakia. So this is just mathematically a sign of deplorable and very sad social irrelevance of theater criticism. The daily newspaper has stopped publishing the critics on a daily basis, or even on any basis, around 2015. So it goes back to Kalina Stefanova comment that this was a very important and border decade. Yeah, the theater criticism in newspaper disappeared, definitely, maybe. We all know that theater critics should be involved in Sanana business, in festivals as a curator, as a literary manager, as the one that adapts the text or edits. But the big question, can he or she be independent in their opinions in that situation? We all know that theater people, you know, pretend to like theater critics, but in fact they can quite hate them for many good and bad reasons. I'm quoting now, you know, this popular saying in Slovakia that is promoted by one of the very good actor, actually, that the real artist doesn't need a critic. If it needs someone, then he's not a real artist. So, and this popular prejudices are spreading more and more, and still we are in desperate need, more than ever in our history. We are in need in frank, competent criticism, especially in such a small country and as Slovakia, when everyone knows everyone and everyone meets everyone, and otherwise we will end up in just endless chain of gossiping, pep talks, and PR presentation, false loyalties, and we will definitely lose the context and the reason for seeing seeing a show. I will now read something, you will recognize it. Criticism would have an increasingly important role, as the need to make sense of what we see increases with the complexities of modern life. It's only fine perception of beauty that will allow us to create meaning, joy, empathy, and peace out of chaos of hacks and reality. So this is obviously the quote from Oscar Wilde, the essay, The Critic as Artist. So this, obviously we are in chaos, we are in very bad reality, and the only mean how to make some sense of this is to think critically, to write critics. I remember in 2003, the Slovak section of AICT organized a seminar called very, challenging, the profession to theater critics. But even at that time, we put a question mark to this. And our keynote speaker was Krzysztof Mieszkowski. At time, he was a theater critic and editor for Didascalia journal. And later on, he became the head of Polish theater in Wrocław. He became member of parliament, politician, and TV anchor. So I think his life career is a sort of answer to our seminar and to our question that we put back in at the beginning of this century and this millennium. So I believe, to conclude, that theater critic, to being critic is not a profession but a vocation. It's not employment but by attitude that should be used in all occupation, all posts we can ever hold in our life, and it's our duty to enhance, inspire very contextual, scientific, analytical approach to everything that we are involved, whether we work for festival theaters and whatever. And
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Susanna. Because we are running late, I would like to thank you indeed for this very insightful presentation of the situation in Slovakia. As I said, we may have a competition where we have really a country, whether we have a country which needs critics, which is COVID. Now we go to the next presenter, and she's from Latvia. She's Lauma Melena Barkevica. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing the last name correctly.
Hello.
Lauma, I have to say that I met you indirectly before now, because I haven't actually seen you. I hadn't seen you before this meeting because I read the beautiful magazine which you have edited. And I would like to introduce you first as a theater critic, as a researcher, music and theater critic, and as someone who has created a really very, very important magazine. You can see it now, I'm sharing it, about contemporary Latvian theater. I think that it gives a very good notion of the situation in Latvian theater. And I don't know if you see it now. Yes, do you see it? Yeah. And if all of our countries were to create that kind of magazines, we would know much more about each other. Lauma has a very interesting, although very complex title, Theater Work of her Speech Theater Worker at Your Service. Complex professional identities in contemporary theater, Latvian examples. So I invite you now to take over.
Hello, everyone. I'm really thrilled and glad to see you, everybody of you here on Zoom, unfortunately indirectly. However, I'm very glad to be in such a good company. And when Kalina spoke and Susanna, I was just nodding and nodding, agreeing that we really share the same ideas, the same problems, the same observations. And thank you for inviting me as well to participate in this conference tackling the topic we all are involved. Permanent multitasking is what we are through today, especially during the pandemic. And I will try to share today a few ideas I have been thinking about lately regarding the profession of theater critic and theater people in general, interacting with society, politics, nature, new technologies, given circumstances, and so on. I am sorry if I repeat in some ideas, because I see that really we are on ongoing topical subject today. But last year, like 2020, has been a year literally everybody wearing masks and being forced to change plans. And we have to deal what we face, and performing arts is what faces changes and challenges, not only because of pandemic. On the one hand, theater is increasing its social engagement, teaches on such topics as biodiversity, recycling, or minorities' rights. On the other, sometimes it is diving in technological abyss of screens and virtual communication anew, like reconstructing the fourth wall that can easily be switched off by the audience. As for the theater community, one of the most visible trends is multiple or complex identity of theater makers. Devised or co-authoring theater has brought in new concepts of text and performance production. An actor can be an author, a writer, director, performer, and even a producer in one person. A director can be a dramaturg, a set designer, producer, and even performer. There are many these combined options between theater professions, blurred in the concept theater maker. Open in a way new horizons and opportunities. Critics, though, somehow stay apart unless they are themselves dramaturgs or producers, as mentioned before today. They may be also literally consultants at theaters, and on rare occasion, theater makers themselves. The role and status of theater critics has been significantly endangered by prevalence of social media, providing 140-character tweets or instant Facebook posts by enthusiastic random people overtaking analytic reviews. At least they are published often faster, feeding the first impression-based grounds about new production. When pandemic started and theater processes were put on standby, Latvian critics ironically discussed that thanks God none of us makes a living out of criticism, having other jobs in teaching, in research, in culture journalism, in translation, and so other professions. We actually do literally this and that, as stated in the title of this conference. Nevertheless, my general thesis is that we all are in the same boat, and there should not be any gaps between theater makers and theoreticians. We all are theater workers, despite the word worker probably recalls its class-related connotation. And yet, art is work, whether it is practice or theory, just we experience some transformation of functions. Therefore, we are forced, or we have to reconsider and recontextualize ourselves to make our work to be appreciated in the society. I strongly believe that culture and performing arts along it is definitely a resource for development, a path to understanding of differences, of raising awareness, social issues, and contribution to community building. In Latvia, we currently experience tax reforms that will impact self-employed persons in 6 months, increasing the social tax rate basing on the official minimum monthly salary, without considering that art workers tend to have different income structure than monthly salary. We are working on project fundings, we are working on honoraries, some of us do part-time jobs, and we tend to have sometimes irregular income. So that would be really a burden, and everybody is very concerned about it. What theater critic has as weapons? He has words, analytic and communication skills in his arsenal, and therefore, meanwhile the theater process is slowed down by the lockdowns, it is the time to reflect, to document, and to spread the information through international networks. From the evaluators of theater productions, critics more and more become mediators or moderators. It is a notion mentioned several times in this conference yesterday and today, So he's the moderator of the multiple voices that performing arts address to the audience. For instance, the 10 years old Latvian theater portal Kroders LV recently noticed that the most read section of the portal is no more reviews, but the section of direct voice, interviews and discussions with theater makers. I love the term yesterday used by Penny Lynn, the pracademics, like practics and academics, theater professionals who involve also in teaching and theoretical processes. And it is great as trend develops. We critics are also people who bring in new terms that relate to current realities. For instance, in Latvian, there is no word for theater maker as general term, or theater worker, which is even worse if we want that the term includes also critics. I would conclude that keywords in today's situation is multitasking, diversity, cooperation, and involvement. Awareness that we all are steering the same ship. And now I would like to share my screen to offer you some few examples of Latvian theater where the diversity, cooperation, and involvement appear. Is it visible? So firstly, I introduced to the stage director, Krista Burāne, who actively cooperates with contemporary theater festival Homo Novus and is one of the most visible artists of socially involved theater. What she does, in the slide you see her methods, she often integrates social anthropology and storytelling in her productions, involving different people and communities outside theater circles. She also tends to raise awareness of political, social, and environmental issues, and which makes also her work hard to review in a way, because she often uses like non-professional actors or not actors at all, and storytellers and everything. I will show two examples of recent productions of her. Oh, sorry, The Immorals, or in a different translation, it is The Depraved Ones. It is a study of adolescents and contemporary young poets whose work adequacy to school programs has been publicly questioned by one of the parties in the parliament in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, leading to notorious morality amendments to the law of education. There are two young poet actors who are playing there, and that performance is made in poetry. And also the audience is invited to judge whether the contemporary poetry is or is not probably adequate to adolescent audiences. And accompaniment is by teachers' choir. So it is really, really moving and really strong production that addresses the problems we face in our society today. Another performance she did in 2020, last fall, in Homo Novus Festival, is Trees Talk No More. It is based on Latvian fairy tale that in ancient times trees used to talk to people and then stopped when it turned out that talking to people is useless because people keep cutting trees down more and more. It was actually a walking audio performance through Riga Boulevard Circle. Krista Burāne herself being a narrator, she told the story of 27-year-old Georg Kuhhoff, who used to be a director of Riga Parks and Gardens 100 years ago and planted many linden trees in Riga. And at the end of the performance, actually, the producers, the group planted 2 trees, and the spectators were invited to paint on the pavement with some chemical substance, which is a little bit darker than the pavement, a potential shadow of the tree that will grow in 100 years and provide the shadow in the, like, for instance, in summer. So this is how Krista works and how she actually reveals her concerns about what is going on in the society. She also integrated several stories on trees and life told by, on the left side in the picture, there is a scientist, a physic actually, and on the right side of the screen, you see a little girl telling the fairy tale about why trees talk no more to people. Another example I would like to introduce is The Boy Who Saw in the Dark, which is directed by Valters Sīlis and produced by Latvian National Theatre, which is based on a prose work dramatized by author herself, Rasa Vugaviča. And it is a story of a boy who was born to blind parents and grows up in a community of visually impaired people, serving as the eyes of everybody, and step by step noticing the differences between the world in here and out there, let's put it so. Due to a particularly elaborated soundscape, the production is suitable for visually impaired audiences, which is an unprecedented experience in Latvian theatre if we are not counting few examples of theatre of senses before the pandemic, where spectators are blindfolded and invited to experience the performing through sound and touch. And finally, well, Kalina already did it. I was going to ask to permit me a short advertisement, but Kalina already did it at the beginning of my presentation, that I am really proud and happy that we, together with the most distinguished Latvian theatre critics and also theatre makers, in November presented a theatre bookzine of last 10 years on Latvian theatre process in English. It is available for everyone, free of charge, electronically. In the picture, you see the printed book. We had a limited number of copies, and it includes articles by theatre critics. It includes a case study on interaction between contemporary choreography and theatre. It includes the personal story of Krista Buran, the director I mentioned today, and her relationship with the Homonovs Festival. There is a self-reflective play by dramaturg Jānis Valodis, and there is a material also compiled by me, which is called Director's Voices, where stage directors share in speech their opinion of what is going on today in theatre processes. So this is what our Latvian theatre worker community has done during the pandemic, through cooperation, diversity, and involvement. And what I would like to say that let's do everything the community of theatre workers grows stronger despite these restrictions, distances, and danger processes we experience.
Laura, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this very insightful talk, for letting us a glimpse at the Latvian theatre landscape and both of the theatre and the theatre criticism. I'm very much impressed by the title of Krista's show, Trees Talk No More Since Then. I love this title. This reminds me of a poem by Neruda. Other days will come and somebody will discover why the plants and stars do not talk, why they are silent or something. I'm now translating it literally from Bulgarian. So thank you very much. With this, we move to our last panelist, Plamen Radev. And with him, we go back to the artists because Plamen is actually also a jack of all trades. He is a puppet theater graduate. He is an actor, a director, a manager of our most important, most established street theater, outdoor type of theater, which is called Žar Theater in Bulgarian. This means at once embers and zeal, zest, ardor doing something. He has worked also in Korea for 4 seasons as a mime. And last but not least, he is now a PhD student of mine at the National Academy for Theatre and Film Arts in Sofia. So I give you the floor, Plamen.
Thank you, Kalina, for introducing me. And thank you, Octavian and Bernice and everyone else standing behind the organization of this wonderful conference. for the opportunity to become part of it and to be with all of you guys. I'll try to be brief and to keep the timing. I was asked about that, and I know that we are almost at the end of the session. So please let me to share my oops. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, super. And I'll go, I think it's not moving.
There's something
Sorry,
which I forgot to say, that they work mainly with fire.
Yeah, I'm going to tell a bit more about the story of our theater. Just this technical issue. It was standing a long time and doesn't allow me to. Sorry. Can you see it again? No?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Is it moving? It's not. Ah, yeah, it's moving. Okay. All right. So I'm starting. Last year, Professor Pavis, you know it, the famous French scholar, was named Dr. Honoris Causa at our theater academy in Sofia. And in his speech on this occasion, he said the following. I'm going to read only the last sentence. It is much more reasonable to recognize that we should not specialize and limit ourselves to just one activity, but always to be open to new adventures. What a tempting opinion. But on the other hand, maybe you ever heard the Bulgarian proverb, it's kind of popular, you cannot carry two watermelons under the same arm. The English equivalent is you must not run after two hares at the same time. In other words, concentrate on one thing or you will achieve nothing. Clear message. And it's probably truth, but I don't think us, the artists, we pay much attention to this smart advice. Plurality of the roles shared by a single artist or critic is quite often practiced nowadays, as we also heard many times yesterday and today. Take me as an example. Being part of an independent theater collective, working in a country where the theater landscape is dominated by a state, municipality-funded network or conventional repertory theaters, I was many times urged, and still I am, to do things that were not my initial intention starting my theatrical career. I was trained as a mime and a clown professionally. And later, I graduated the Bulgarian National Academy of Theatre and Film Arts as a theater director focused on nonverbal and physical theater. In 1993, after the fall of the communistic regime in our country and the start of the democratic changes, me and my artistic partner, Elena Papp, we took the wind of change and we started an independent theater company we call it an English fire theater, because the core of the meaning is to do something with fire, with elan. So this was one of the first amongst very few independent theater companies in that time. We were young, we were not rich enough, we were a handful of people working mostly in fringe theatrical genre, mime, often on the street, passing the head. So obviously we were not able to pay author rights, stage designers, composers, stage and production managers, stage hands, etc. We had to do everything or almost everything by ourselves. Luckily, both me and Elena, we were good in writing scripts, so we could write our own scripts. Anyway, almost nobody even now is writing mime dramas or for pantomime for the nonverbal theater. Also, before the start of her career in theater, Elena was educated in school as a fashion designer. And me, I had some experience in wood carving and mask making. So it all came into use. This is how it all started. We were not only actors and directors, but in the same time, we were playwrights, We were makers of our puppets and requisite. We were stagehands, technicians, and we were also trying to popularize and sell our art in the best possible way. We still work like this. Soon enough, we realized that we need to study more if we want to do all these extra roles successfully. It was urged. So we started to join all kind of postgraduate educational forums. Amsterdam, Maastricht, Summer University, University of Theatre of Nations, organized by ITI, Academy for Cultural Managers, International School for Outdoor Performing Arts, etc., etc. Many workshops and master classes raising our knowledge and skills. We tried also to find a way to send our actors, the way actors we work with abroad, to study somewhere in the master classes and workshops. We also needed to learn how to write applications in order to gain some grants from the EU or local programs. And we learned by practice, because in that time in the Theatrical Academy, there was no such thing as how to write a project or how to work to make for a grant, to make an application. 15 years ago, we decided to make a sharp turn into completely unexplored field and to create our own unique form of theater. We blended the ancient and poetical art of mime with the mastery of playing with fire and with some other techniques, combining, coming from street theater, circus, puppet theater, carnival, etc. And we call this new theatrical form a fire drama, because it is a drama, usually non-verbal, but the fire is the main tool of expression in it. It is everywhere, in the story, in the costume, in the decoration, in the props we use on the stage. Making our fire theater performances, we are, I can say, one-eyed amongst the blind, one-eyed who try to lead the blind people. We constantly need to learn and to try new things, because we don't know how to do it in the beginning. We have it just in our minds. We need to research and experiment, and in the same time, we need to share our knowledge and experience with the actors we work with, because there is still no education for fire drama or for street theater in Bulgaria, and it's very rare also in Europe. So we became trainers and educators and moderators of researchers, experiments, and group creative processes. This is also we were pushed to do this. And besides, we had to defend our innovative form of art, to popularize it amongst the general public, to ask the authorities and media for the same support and recognition as the conventional theater has. We also started to use our theater for social causes. We started to work with communities. This made us activists, influencers, and cultural mediators. And at last, but not least, because the street theater in Bulgaria is still not really recognized academically, and there is still lack of interest towards it from most of the critics. I think Kalina is the exception in that case, because almost nobody is writing reviews or something on the outdoor theater in Bulgaria. So I started a PhD. I was very happy that there was this opportunity to start this PhD in the Theatrical Academy on the topic of the European outdoor theater. So I'm going also to use this new term, Lauma mentioned it already, a pracademic. It's a very nice term, I really love it, borrowed from yesterday. I turned into a practitioner trying to make sense of his practice scientifically. Hope it is going to be of some use and to make some change in the landscape. As you can see, we need to be many-sided and to cover many roles in one and the same time. Undoubtedly, it is not boring, and of course, it is a beneficial way of being artists. It is developing our personalities, it is showing our hidden potential, but, there is a but, it is quite challenging too. And sometimes I'm not really sure, is it a blessing or a curse to work and live in that way? Because multitasking is exhausting thing. Working this way, sometimes we don't have enough time and energy to work out our artistic task properly. Being manager, being producer, being PR of your own company or playwright, sometimes you don't have enough time to be a good actor, good director. We need to juggle with our many roles to race against time, and sometimes to sacrifice ourselves as artists for the success of the endeavor.
Thank you very much, Suleiman.
And the solution, 30 seconds. The solution is we need to not overestimate ourselves, and we need to make categorical choices, sometimes not easy ones. What exactly we want, what exactly we have to do in the particular situation, and when to make these choices to try to be satisfied by them. We also need to establish around us the cultivated harmonious collectives of artists we work with, which cover altogether the needs of the company, in order not one or two persons to do everything. And the most important, and Fred mentioned it yesterday from Yaroslav from Grotowski Institute, whatever role the artist or the critic or someone else in the creative process decides to do or is urged to do, he or she has to base always on his or her core values and core principles. Taking different roles, we have to keep being nothing else but our true selves.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Plamene. I'm very glad that you mentioned the way we say it in Bulgarian. It's impossible to carry several watermelons under one arm, with another equivalent of which is to have many hats. And that actually also raises a question. Well, we may be able to, for sometimes to do many things at once, but are we not spreading thin in some of them? And Nikolai Pesuchinsky will correct me if it was Meyerhold or somebody else from the Russian theater practitioners, who said that when you move a finger on stage, then every cell of your body should be devoted to that kind of action. Can we actually do this can we actually reach that kind of concentration when we do so many things at once? Thank you very much for being viewers and participants in this panel.
Thank you very much, Galina.
Over to you.
Speaking of concentration, there is nothing more precious in an online event than the concentration of and on time. And I think this is something for everybody to consider, particularly from now on, because otherwise we lose focus and we lose energy. So let's maintain this stream of excitement. And it is about the right time for me to introduce an artist that I immediately thought of when I planned this event. I discovered him for the first time in Hong Kong in 2016, and I thought of him as the Robert Lepage of his generation. But he shares a lot with another artist, Tadeusz Kantor, and not just the name. I'm talking about Tadeusz Phillips, who is American, but now lives and works in Colombia, near Bogota. So he had to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and there's no theater artist I can think of who is an early riser. So it took a great deal of effort and determination, and I'm grateful to him for that. I'd like him to say a few words to us, to all of you, about his work, about his creative process, and about his ability to move between this and that, being an actor, a director, a playwright, a producer, a programmer, and all of them with extraordinary poignancy and efficiency. So Tadeusz, welcome to this event, and thank you from my heart for making this tremendous effort to be with us. We cannot hear you. You have to turn on the sound. It's fine, he needs to find the microphone. It's interesting that Tadeusz designed a show that is one of the very few experiments specifically created for Zoom. It's called Zoom Hotel, and you can look it up. It's an extraordinary performance. that invites people from different parts of the world to immerse themselves in an online experience like no other. So it is most ironical that somebody like him, who created an entire show for Zoom, has no microphone for the Zoom event. But this is the unpredictability of the online adventure. So Tadeusz, can you hear me? And can we hear you? That's the question. It's still taking some time, I think. But it is fine, because it gives me an opportunity to invite you again to look it up. It's called Zoo Motel, Two Different Worlds. But of course, if you read it fast, you become aware of the pun, Zoom Hotel. And it is a show in which the spectators are invited to enter different motel rooms. And then something amazing unfolds. And it is due to the creativity, the passion, and the energy of Tadeusz, whom I think I can hear at last.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Over to you, Tadeusz, my friend.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much. Sorry about that. I don't know what was wrong with the mic on that. I switched computers. Thanks, Octavian. Let me put this on the gallery. Yeah, to be precise, and it's very simple. I'm a independent theater artist. I guess my ideal, my dream in the beginning was to be a theater director, but I'm from the United States, which has certain amount of challenges on what creativity is allowed in the theater. And mostly it's just when I was growing up, talking shows, realistic shows with the kitchen sinks. And then I discovered through a mentor of mine named Encho Avramov, who's actually from Bulgaria, but lived in the States. Transformational action design theater. I ended up studying for a year at Damu in Prague, and then simply developing my own performances with King Lear. I started with King Lear when I was 24. I figured, why not start at the most difficult thing, where I did Lear with some puppets and stuff in a cafe. And from there, basically just started developing my own work and growing from there until now. Essentially what I do is create my own work that like the whole idea of a lot of these themes in the conferences. I essentially write, produce, sometimes act in, or a lot of times act in, direct, and design, but always in collaboration with other artists, helping kind of on all those things at the same time. And I had, let's see here if I can hook this up. I had everything set up on the other computer, but I'll just show you a couple things real quick if I can make it work. Just to give you an idea, my main inspirations, as Octavian said, are Tadeusz Kantor, Peter Brook, Robert Lepage, and I'll dive in right with this. Let's see if we can make this work here. So it says here, Zoom. And yeah, like Octavian said, I'm here in Bogota, Colombia, well, in the outskirts of Bogota, where I'm based with my wife and son. And normally we tour all the time, which we don't do as much anymore, obviously. So here, I'm going to share the screen. And let's see if this works. I've never done this. Okay, start broadcast. This I'll show you. Let's see here. You are sharing screen, okay? Do you guys see this screen? It's a Vimeo screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah, hang on. No, I'm on the iPad and I do not know how this works. So we'll have to do this just with descriptions, unfortunately. But so basically, the kinds of things I've done is where Octavian saw me was I'd done a lot of shows where I researched touring around the world or traveling like to the Amazon or Cuba, where people from the United States aren't supposed to go. So I had to sneak in, and then I would make a show. And I found out that the outtakes were actually a lot about crossing borders. And those were more interesting than the actual performance, the act of trying to get to the different countries to make the performance. So that was collected into a show called 17 Border Crossings, That's what Octavian saw in Hong Kong. That's essentially was just a solo performance on a very Peter Brook open stage. So everywhere we tour it, we take away everything off the stage and only use a bar of lights as a metaphor for the abstract nature of borders, because the border doesn't really exist. We just invented it. So, and then I proceeded to do 17 different completely crossings of different borders from Cuba to Colombia and Brazil to the United States and Mexico, to that ridiculous border that's a chairlift between Germany and Austria, that you're all of a sudden in Germany when you started in Austria on the chairlift. And that was kind of like a solo theater performance. And then at the same time, I'll get hired to direct plays, where then I'm allowed to bring my creativity with the funding of a theater and a budget and a set design. So we made a show last year that only ran for a week called Anthropoceno, which is about the Anthropocene, which is the human epoch that some scientists say we're entering now, where we control the environment. And so we made a piece that the stage was very much a similar Peter Brook kind of situation, where it was a half globe, but black like a stage, with all these trap doors that had a skin that could spin open and reveal a Buckminster Fuller geodesic dome inside. And what was crazy about that piece is the main character gets pregnant. She goes to the doctor and gets a sonogram. And so we revealed the child inside her belly as a dancer. And the Greek costume designer was like, she must be in a gas mask. She must be in a gas mask. And I was like, why? This was in, January. So we put this naked Ukrainian dancer inside this dome with this gas mask on as a vision of the woman seeing her child. And then, a month later, the show was canceled because of COVID. And then the thing that Octavian was mentioning, which I'll just send you guys the link, you have to look it up yourself, that we're currently doing is because everything was canceled, right? We, and I'm here in Colombia, there's no jobs, there's nothing, you know what I mean? This was just a base for my family and I. So we invented a show called Zoom Hotel, which is a show I perform in my studio. I was going to broadcast from there, you guys, but my kid's sleeping and I'd wake him up because it's next to his bedroom. But we reconverted my normal studio into a film set of a motel room with a camera in the center, that we do a play. We have a show today at 2:00 anytime globally called Zoom Hotel for only 21 audience members. That is our proposal to creating remote theater that doesn't feel like a replacement for a show that was canceled, but it's a unique art form in itself. And you guys all should look that up. Wang Chang, I think, out of Shanghai, or Beijing, from Ri Theater, or Theatre Ri, wrote the online theater manifesto, which is really interesting, saying that if you embrace the online theater form, not as a replacement for theater, but as a new form, it actually is very democratic. People don't need to park their cars to go see the show. They don't need to travel 4 hours. They can just sign on online. But then the artist's responsibility is to try to make it as engaging and live as possible. So with this piece, I've tried to employ all my big directing ideas and shrink them, and cinematic ideas and early puppetry ideas and miniatures into a live play that we can perform to audiences around the world. That again was self-produced, but I collaborate with a set designer and artist from Philadelphia, and my house managers are from California. So it's this kind of amazing hybrid. Yeah, there, Octavian just put it. And yeah, if we're sold out, you guys can just email us. Here, I'll give you I can get you guys the Zoom link if anyone ever wants to see it. No problem. But to wrap up, because I know Octavian wants us to be short, is the thing that's been really interesting is kind of what Radev was saying, is, you kind of take the things on your own, you start making them, and then you look for opportunities when you can get them, but you also create your own opportunities. And that's what's been extraordinary with Zoom Hotel, is we've been running every weekend since September, to audiences all around the world. And what I've done is collaborated with any theater I've toured with. I've said, hey, can I do the show with you guys? Don't pay me, just put it on your website. And they will, and we'll sell tickets so we're able to pay our expenses. And then, so like technically the show today at 2:00 is simultaneously at the Alfred Dvorak Theater in Prague, the Teatro Theater in Jönköping, Sweden, and Theater Nation, a new theater in Hastings. So this is kind of international collaboration where we've been able to, make the best of this situation and continue working and talking with audiences after the show and pushing the forums forward, That's the basic thing, Octavian. Anything I should add to that?
Thank you so much. There's something that I should add to that, and that is that I encourage and I urge everybody to go online and discover this website, www.zoomotel.org, because there is something awaiting them that is like nothing they've tried before. It is really a cultural experience that opens up a new world of possibilities in terms of the online interaction between the artist and the spectator. And I'm so thrilled and pleased and grateful that there was made the effort to be with us today and trigger that interest that I think should be dedicated to his endeavor to create something via Zoom that feels like real theater, not a mere replacement for it. So thank you very much, Tadeusz. And I think now it's time for a special moment in this conference, a panel dedicated to two cultural traditions that are related and that form a sense of a microcosm, almost an ecosystem, Taiwan and Hong Kong. So over to Bernice to chair this panel dedicated to the critical tradition and the critical present of Taiwan and Hong Kong theater.
Thank you so much, and thank you for Octavian for suggesting such a great topic. And I think it's very relevant to not only for Hong Kong and Taipei, but also for a global context. And my name is Bernice. I'm the general manager of IATC Hong Kong. I'm a full-time art administrator, but I will regard myself as also a full-time theater critic. And I'm so proud to have this identity of being a full-time theater critic, because I truly believe that this identity always keep me like energetic and creative. So it's a really privilege to be able to host this small panel discussion to introduce you about our theater's critics situation in Hong Kong and also in Taipei. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you our first speaker, Yu Tai-yong. Tai-yong is currently the International Affairs Manager and Residence Dramaturg of Formosa Circus Arts. And it's a contemporary circus company based in Taipei. And Tai-yong is also currently the Deputy Managing Director of IATC Theatre Critics in the Taiwan branch. And I do have a very privilege and have chance to visit his company's show, which is a really fantastic and creative experience. So Tai-yong is going to introduce us about making Taiwan circus under the global spotlight. So over to you, Tai-yong. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bernice. Hello, everyone. I'm Tai-yong from Taiwan, and very happy to see you all here. That it's been, I think, since almost 8 years ago that we started this incredible online journey with everyone in different corners in the world. What I'm going to introduce you today is that in IATC Taiwan branch that we really want to focus not only in the conventional theater area or conventional theater fields, but with different kinds of performing arts genre. So since I'm working in a contemporary circus company in Taiwan, I'm going to share with you a new publication, a seasonal media that we started to publicate last year. But first, I would like to share with you the current situation of the circus ecosystem in Taiwan. So it is very similar with many different countries in the world. The circus scene, there are very less, and in Taiwan there are no academic research. And in Taiwan there's an ambiguous condition of being identified and categorized as an art form. So for example, the company I work with now is getting subsidy under the category of dance. And there's only one school that cultivates circus performers and artists, but they don't use the word circus at all. We have one national acrobatic troupe with rigid structure and mindset. But we also have national art center like National Kaohsiung Center for the Arts in South Taiwan, that they do have an annual event called Circus Platform. And the one that's going to finish its building soon next year, Taipei Performing Arts Center, TPAC, nurtures circus artists as well, and also nurtures other kind of artists, other genres of artists, to understand circus with a long-term workshop called Big Top Project. And the local cultural bureau in different region in Taiwan, and in the past few years, really expect circus to revitalize the art scene by doing big outdoor shows. And meanwhile, the circus practice is really blossoming and changing very rapidly in Taiwan, but with no writings nor discussion foundation. So this is why me and my colleagues came up with this idea that I also very, how to say, resonate a lot with our Bulgarian colleagues before. That I think the outdoor artists or the circus performance, they are very good at using what they have just by their hands. And this is a kind of the spirit I learned from them. So we came up with the idea doing a seasonal magazine called 读马戏. It means read circus in Mandarin. And it's the first ever media for circus in Taiwan, and founded last year as a quarterly magazine. And the mission is to record and witness the Taiwanese circus and connect Taiwanese circus with the world. And published by the company I work with, Formosa Circus Art, 读马戏 represents the ongoing circus events like productions, shows, circus culture evolution, also circus knowledge, and we do interviews and talks and make records with artists. I'm gonna share the screen with you with our latest edition. Just a second. Though in Mandarin, the only thing I think you can see, understand is the title for it. The latest edition is called Plates, Transformation and Recomposition, the 2020 Taiwan Circus Retrospect. So we have a overall review for the circus scene in Taiwan. And so let me go back here. What's the result is that we've been receiving a vast positive feedback from the professionals in circus fields and also in other genre, because people trying to understand what is happening in the circus field, because it's a rather quite narrow and small, and people, even for other professionals in performing arts scene, don't really understand what is really going on. And also we have a privilege to work with our international peers called Circus Talk. It's an international circus media platform, and also it's more like a social media platform. And they have a channel called Circus News. So starting from this year, we will exchange with them every season for an article. So they will provide one for us. We will translate that into Mandarin and post it in our edition. And then we will provide one for them, reporting Taiwan and Asia circus condition. We do have some dilemma that there's a lack of funding because it's totally now it's totally under the project is under the company. We do apply for subsidy, but it's really not enough. And also there are very few professionals and critics in Taiwan that have the knowledge or the focus for circus writing. And at the moment it is only in Mandarin, but we have a chance to translate that into English, even in French. We are under discussion with the National Arts Center here in Taiwan, and hopefully we will know the results soon. So this is a short report about what is the media about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taiyong. It's good to know that Taipei artists are actually bridging the connection to our international context, because we know the genre of circus is a very important genre in Europe, and also I'm really looking forward to see your show in no matter nowhere in Taipei or in anywhere in the world, and I hope that you will be able to bring your shows to on an international stage. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce our second speaker, Wei Wanyong. Wanyong is a young but a very experienced arts administrator. She is the youngest executive director of OISTEC. OISTEC is International Organization of Scenographers, Theater Architects, and Technicians. And we all know that it's an international platform for theater makers around the world. And Wanyong is also a dance critic. So she would like to share with us about a topic on how I try to be a dance critic, a guide for newcomers. So over to you, Wanyong. Thank you so much.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Wanyong. Today I'm going to share a topic using about 4 minutes. The topic is how I try to be a dance critic. Well, I am a dance critic, a dancer, and an arts manager, but I am not a scholar. So when I write about dance, my goal is to write a dance review for those who didn't see the show. Dance is an art of time and space. Dance is beautiful. Yet people often complain to me that contemporary dance is so difficult to understand. People often come to me and say, oh my goodness, I can never understand contemporary dance. Therefore, I want to use my writing as a means of communication to reveal how I feel when I see those movements, to reveal what I think of the piece, and to share my perspectives. But communications goes both ways. I knew that. Hence, when I write, I try not to use academic terms. I try not to use words that are not used in everyday life. I want my article to be read on their phones when people are taking metro to work, when people are waiting at grocery stores, when they are waiting on the queue for the coffee, for the food. And if I don't understand a dance piece, I would simply put, I don't understand. I wouldn't try to over-explain what I feel about it. I think by being honest, being transparent is important. I hope to use my writing to reach to more people. And when people don't understand a dance, I don't want my writing to provide answers. I try to let them feel how I feel. That's what I'm trying to do. And that's how I try to be a dance critic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. it's short, but it's a very inspiring and interesting sharing. And although I'm not personally met, I don't have chance to met Wan Yong, but of course I read a lot of her articles. And
Oh, really? Well, I'm surprised. Really?
Why not?
Because I don't. Yeah, because I write only in Mandarin. I think, yeah, only in Mandarin. So I'm pretty surprised. Yeah.
It's good. So later on, I'll invite you to write for IATC-HK because we have an online column for everyone. So I will invite everyone to join us. And I would like to introduce our next speaker from Hong Kong, Felix Chen. Felix is a very interesting critics. He's of course our professional member of IATC Hong Kong, but on the other hand, he's very busy on some other things, not about writing critics. He's also a curator, a producer, and also illustrator. He finished his master degree last year in London, and I'm sure that his multiple identities of being a theater critic and also an artist can give us a little bit more inspiration of how to be able to survive in such a critical time of this year or in the future. So over to you, Felix. Thank you so much for your sharing.
Hi, I'm Felix. And maybe I share the PowerPoint for you first because I make a PowerPoint. But actually, I change my topics continuously when I listen all of your topic because so many topics you have done, and it's well done for all of you. And I don't want to continue or repeat some points. So I just would like to introduce myself briefly. I'm Felix, and I'm a theater creator, illustrator, and critic in Hong Kong. And I did so many productions in Hong Kong, maybe in last year, because you know that last year is a pandemic time, but I did so many online programs. I can't that before. I did only online program. It's around, I did 12 programs in 8 months already. So yeah, I did so many. And I also, of course, I am a critic, and I also did so many critics in the world. For example, in Holland Festival in Taiwan, and I also research in the Taiwan Festival, also as a residency in the National Theatre in Taipei. But because I'm a producer, so I always think about that. Sometimes maybe you always understand the artists and critics always fight together, because the artists always say that, you don't understand me because you are not in the productions, and you're critics and you never touch the production or the schedule or the procedure in the productions. But for me, because I'm a producer, so I can say that I can understand, or I can stand in the artist's way to write some critics or some reviews for them. Well, I'm not talking about the sympathy to the artist. I'm talking about the understanding about the whole procedure of the production. For example, the background, the situation of production, the funding system, and the policy. Maybe I can say something at least on my productions, but I would like to skip that, because I would like to talk about the Hong Kong situation now. For you, maybe for the whole world, the pandemic is a huge problem from the last year to nowadays. But now Hong Kong, I can say that pandemic is not the only issue or the huge issue in Hong Kong, because in Hong Kong it's not too damaging in pandemic, I can say that. But we are facing the other problems. There's a national security law, maybe you know that. I would like to talk about this, because we are facing a really huge problem about the freedom of speech and criticism. In this time, for critics, I have to think a lot how to survive. We are critics under this national law. For example, can I have the freedom of speech in Hong Kong? Can we talk about the politics in Hong Kong? Can we criticize the political points in the theater or society? Or can we judge the unfair funding sponsorship system in somewhere? Or can we report the evilness of the cultural policy in Hong Kong or in China? Maybe I can tell a case, or maybe we always face about this case. In Hong Kong, in the last few moments or before the national security law, we cannot say Taiwan is a country in the publishing and in the book or reviews, because it's not exactly correct under the law of China. But in the past, maybe the government will tell you, you just delete the words or you can change something, right? But in nowadays, under the national security law, maybe, I don't know, maybe we will be in jail if I write it. So what I can write or what I cannot write, I can say that I have no answer of it, because we don't understand the baseline or the red line, we can say red line in the law. We have to do the censorship ourselves every single moment and live in the fear in the moment. And if you would like to criticize in freely, for example, in the protest, can we write this? Or if some people do the theater and the contents about the protest, can we write it or can we criticize it? Can we talk about we call it H31, there's a day the police attacked the citizen in the underground. And in the general ideas from the government, we cannot discuss the after situation, after this news. For example, after the underground just closed down, we cannot talk about it. We cannot guess or think what situation inside the underground. We just get a few of facts in this. So that's how we can survive in this situation. For me, because I'm a producer and I did some programs, so I also did some things to react or to talk about it or to react this case. For example, I did an online program is talking about the 7 stupid cat slays. It's about the cats would like to find the losing human, because the human just lost in the underground, and the cats discuss what we can talk and what we cannot talk. In this case, in this Zoom production, the audience have to bring their cats, their own cats, and see in the Zoom. So our audience are the cats, we're the cats. So the cats talk with the cats. It's just like gossip. Let's talk about, it's so evil in Hong Kong, and we have to talk about it, and we have to save the humans in secretly. This is a gossip between the cats. So it's a context of this situation. And the other works I work is Cats and the Coastal Forest. It's exactly talking about the protest. But I cannot tell that. I cannot say that in Hong Kong situation. I told you before. So that I have to use just like a fairy tales, fake story, and use the cats to talk about it. And I cannot say the protest or anything directly, because I don't know the damages for us. For example, maybe I will damage the actors or the crews or the directors in the show. That is the situation in Hong Kong we are facing. And so that I can say that as a critic, I can say that as a critic, I think I have the responsibility to protect the theater actors or theater artists. For example, as a critic, if I watching a show which is talking about the protest, I cannot say that the artist is support the protest or support the people who fight against with the government, because I will damage or I will let them in the dangerous point. But I think that I need, or maybe Hong Kong critics need to voice out the suffering from the political situation in nowadays. I think I really think that we have the responsibility to do that as the Hong Kong critics. This is a main viewpoint I would like to say today, more than the pandemic, the online program. I think you say so well. And of course, I did so many things and I can share the experience, but I think for Hong Kong critics in the whole world discussion, I would like to tell this point more than the online program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Felix. I think Felix aroused or highlight a very delicate and complicated situation in Hong Kong. And I think it's also questions that leave us to think about. Thank you so much for our speakers, and over to you, Octavian.
Thank you, Bernice. Thank you. It was really, really concentrated in all respects, and I appreciate that more than I can tell you. Thank you, everybody, for that. And now it's time not to wrap up or to be conclusive, but to have a panel that will try to bring all these different threads of these different presentations together, if possible. And I'm going to start by inviting a very dear friend who's a professor of theater studies and a critic from Tokyo, Mariko Anazawa, to share some thoughts on what we've been hearing, on what we've been thinking about throughout these two different sessions in 2 separate days. So Mariko, this is the time for you to contribute in this form to an event that was also made possible by you and your involvement.
Okay, at first, I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to participate in this splendid conference, and particularly want to thank Octavian and Berenice and her technical support team of Hong Kong. When I'm faced with such a global critical situation, I reconfirm that the connection between our countries is important. It was the rich time. I'd like to say little about the current situation in Japan relating to the coronavirus. About 1,000 newly infected people are appearing every day now in Tokyo, as there was over 2,000 per day until last week. Some numbers may change. Relief is not possible at all. Meanwhile, normal life is continued, while warning to be prudent are issued by the government in Japan, so the theater is still able to remain open. A state of emergency declaration of about 1 month has been issued in some big cities, including Tokyo, until the beginning of February, although the big theaters are still open now, even if there is the fear of not knowing when and where you may become infected. I'm thankful that I can still live a relatively normal life, other than the theater blockade. The theatrical people living under the emergency declaration of last year, from April to July, do their best in Japan. When we faced the northeastern major earthquake and the tsunami of 2011, along with the worst case scenario, Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station collapse, we do not forget the message of Hideki Noda, director, playwright, and actor, whom a Japanese colleague, Manabu, talked about yesterday. He said that he did not run out of the light of the theater. This thought is still valid to Japanese theatrical people and theater critics today. When I heard the theme of this conference for the first time, I wondered why now? But I realized that now is not the time to be sad. If I use yesterday's words by Mr. Kyriak, therefore, I keenly realize this, that the critic must change in the same way as the artist. But how? I continue to write more and more with passion and love. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariko. This is the right note that we need to add to everything, because we are sad, but we cannot allow ourselves to be sad. This is the contradiction that is governing our professional and personal lives these days. So thank you for introducing smile, the good vibes of your energy and optimism. Thank you very much, Mariko. I'm now going to invite a friend who's a scholar and a theater critic, most respected in St. Petersburg, Nikolai Pesochinsky, to share some thoughts with us, because he has been stoically waiting for this moment. Yesterday he had to leave because he had classes. Today he had to remove himself from his own teaching in order to be with us, which I genuinely appreciate. So Nikolai, now this is the time for you to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm sorry. It seems for me now, after all the discussion, that I'm coming from some 20th century. I mean, from the situation from the 20th century, like 20 years ago. For still we have plenty of the conventional life of theater criticism here in Russia. I am about to talk just to focus on that, on the new roles and on changes in how theater criticism exists in the new reality in the next decade of the 21st century. And actually, I thought of that, just to focus just on that, on life of theater criticism. But during the discussion today, I realized that my ideas are so naive and so small, considering to all the processes that are happening around in the world. For you see, it's strangely, but probably someone would kill me. In neighboring countries. For still, we have lots of conventional work for theater critics. In the National Association of Theater Critics, we have like 150 professionals, 150 professionals, and there are, I think, 647 professional theaters around in Russia. 647. I checked the statistics just yesterday. And some of them really invite theater critics to discuss their productions and to do it in such a special way, and they need some expertise. And there are several theater magazines that are still issued, and they are kind of professional theater magazines. And I just checked in St. Petersburg blog, internet version of St. Petersburg Theater magazine, journal, I would call it journal, like a professional one. Over 20 reviews were published just in January, and all of them were composed by professionals. So in a way, I would say that this conventional situation is good and bad. And on the one hand, it's good that there is such kind of an artillery of professionally educated people that are existing and paid. It's not about myself, but I know maybe several dozen of my colleagues of different generations, and many of them are young, in their 30s and 40s, who are really live on that, who just visit theaters, festivals, workshops. They're paid for that. And in a way, this is probably this old-fashioned manner is good and bad in a way. And I'm just thinking about why it's changing and why it's bad, and what are the new just changes of that here in this old-fashioned universe that I belong to. first, in contemporary participative art and activism, it's interesting how we change our position in the art, because if we participate, we play some role in that, and then if we analyze this performance afterwards, then we have not just to see it from apart, not to see to be independent, but we are dependent, we are inside it, and we act in some way. And I remember that there was a just kind of even scandal when one of my colleagues, theater critics, she participated in Signa performance. You know, there is a Danish group in one of the festivals, and it's a participant event, and you have to really play there, interact with other performers and do something. And actually the director of that performance, she openly criticized that my colleague, that during the whole performance she was kind of negative to how it all passed, that she kind of had her position as a theater critic, of course, being a part, but being inside. So this is a very tricky position where when you are inside and when you are a part. And the same with activism. When you are a part of activistic activity, of activist performance, so also you are in there and out of there, and you say something. So in a way, when you reflect on that, when you write on that, so you write not about them, but also your own feeling influences you. So it's a very interesting thing when actually you participate in Rimini Protocol and of other just things like that. So it's a matter of further discussion. Then the new role of theater critics is in workshops, because there are plenty of workshops of new playwriting, new directing, new tendencies of acting, new theater schools. And then when you participate in the workshop, analyzing the experience of this workshop, you are not merely the person who is just who has the academic or professional position. You have to understand the methodology, and you have to talk to the teachers and to the playwrights, understanding their own personal tasks of playwriting or theater teaching or something like that. So it's the position of being a part of the workshop, not being on the academic, classical, conventional part of being the independent looking of that not involved person. Then I think the new that probably all you share is social networking. For it's quite a different thing when you place your article in the magazine, on paper, on the web magazine. But another thing is when you make a post, when you put your post on a social network, on Facebook, for example, but then there is a thread. The thread of remarks, and remarks to remarks, and then remarks to remarks, and then you're a part of the community. Your expertise doesn't mean anything on that point. You are in dialogue and the multiple communication with lots of people who are have different backgrounds and different ideologies. So you have to convince and to be a part of that dialogue. And basically your expertise is not only doesn't matter in this situation, but I think it's even hated by other people somehow. So you have to find another nature of dialogue, of another kind of discussion in social networking. And the final thing that I want to say, sorry for being so long, that there is a big hatred and struggle with professional theater criticism, with bloggers and with some people of theater makers, but also with some people who really do that, some theater bloggers. We had a very interesting, probably it's a matter of some conference, another to showing, probably to involve that person. We have this such an enfant terrible in theater blogger sphere, Victor Vilisov in St. Petersburg, who made a performance. It was a just performance, like a show. Death of theater criticism. which was a performance when he actually made something with potatoes, when people had to read some papers that were just given to them, spread to them with some, well, just ideas about death of theater criticism, and with some video that was spread with some quotations. Basically, it is extremely interesting to think about. For actually his struggles with institutionalism of theater criticism that is inevitable if it's professional, and with expertise itself, because the idea that expertise itself and professional education limits person from being free, from being liberal. That is why theater criticism should be killed, should be abolished. Instead of them, something new that is non-critique, non-theater criticism should be established, and should necessarily be without professional education, and should especially be out of any institutions. And I think that this in blogosphere is a very well provocative thing to think about, because beside when you hear of that, it lasted for 1 hour, still you are thinking about basic things, about interpretation, about communication, about the right to judge, about different mentalities of different professions. It's not what he is saying, but it's what you are thinking when all that basic things are discussed. About, like I would say, the philosophy of the phenomenon of theater criticism, which is to be killed. Well, I'm sorry for being long, but there are basic things from this corner. So thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Nikolai. Thank you. I think your presentation at this critical moment of the conference, and the pun is intended, has really alerted us to the perils of the blogosphere and to the fact that the democracy of the social media can neutralize critical thinking and critical discourse in a way that is pernicious for theater as an art form. And indeed, we should try to maintain, to uphold, and to promote the virtues of our profession as a profession. And I insist, as a profession, because if indeed everybody is a critic, then no one really is. And that is the critical danger, pun intended again. I'd like to thank Nikolai once again for really introducing these aspects that are supposed to create some anxiety in all of us, which I think is important at this stage, and to introduce a great friend from Poland, professor, theater scholar, but also curator, programmer of a very important event in Sopot called Between, a festival that has created its own ecosystem and has been bringing people from all over the world to have a dialogue about culture, about performing arts, and about their meaning in our world. I'm talking about my wonderful friend Tomasz Wiśniewski, who has been a fervent supporter of this conference from the very beginning, and to whom I owe a sincere debt of gratitude. So Thomas, a few thoughts at the end, in the end, about everything that has been touched upon during the 2 days of our online event.
Thank you very much, Octavian, for introducing me in such a nice way, and also for organizing this fantastic event, which I think proves one of the important things, that even though at this moment we are probably all making huge selections between events that are happening online, I'm pretty sure that it was worthwhile to spend these 2 days with you. And one of the reasons is that at the time when in some countries we've got closed theaters, is the situation in Poland, as we hear from Mariko, it's completely different in Japan when still theaters are open. I think that we are all aware that we are going through, globally, we are going through a similar experience, universal experience. And these 2 days gave us opportunity to listen to a variety of ways, variety of perspectives that are globally enriching each other. And I think it is one of the most important things which have happened during the event organized by you. I think that we all. I was struck by how many stories from different parts of the world resonate in the situation in which I think not only me, myself, but many of us are involved. When Pam and Radev was speaking about this multitasking as an exhausting experience, I think even though I'm a scholar, not a theater practitioner, I think that I precisely knew what he was speaking about. It's enriching to be here and there, to be a scholar and a teacher, academic teacher, and a curator and creator of the festival. But at the same time, I think what Pam and what Radev was saying, it was quite close to me. It was quite well understood, even though it was from a completely different perspective. I was extremely happy when I heard Konstantin Chirac saying that building hope together is something that is the theme, which will be the theme for his activities soon, because I think that it is something that we desperately need to have got the sense of building hope together. And I think that your event, Octavian and Bernice, is something which contributes to this, to prove not only to younger generations, to students that there is a future, but also we need the confirmation, some sort of confirmation there is a future also for theater practice, for theater criticism and scholarship. I think that what hugely resonated throughout these 2 days is the interest in the local artists, and understood, of course, for each individual here in a slightly different way, and the degree to which these micro narratives become to which our micro narratives become important to be shared, to the degree to which our local stories of our local theaters become global stories. One of the reasons being, of course, that all the theatrical people of the theater of art, the sort of people of arts are going through a similar experience now. I think this was, again, I'm just mentioning a couple of examples. I think when Felix Chan was speaking, this observation about political violence, censorship, responsibility, it was hugely personal and local experience, but at the same time, I think it was quite important for many of us, and we know that in our contexts it may it may function differently. But when Paulina Stefano was speaking about the professionalization of criticism, I think that one of the challenges for the nearest future, or for the processes which are ongoing, is also the deprofessionalization, in a sense, of acting, of directing. Well, in a sense, there is a challenge. There might be the necessity for some of the independent theater makers or freelancers. The question probably is quite important still with us. Then when Zuzana Uliacinska was speaking about smart theater, I thought about education as being so important at this moment, to educate, as between Pomiędzy, we just started educational program last year and thought, well, we continued this and we moved it online. And it turned out that for teachers and younger people, it's so important to keep in touch with, with theater in this form, online. And I think it's our obligation also to make sure that they do not forget that online theater is a slightly different thing to the theater that we do remember, where performative liveness is such an important thing. And finally, what I would like to mention, just coming to the beginning of the whole thing, when I was quite struck by Jarosław Fred's statement at the beginning that after all, what really matters is good theater, good craft, that this is something which is so prominent for all of us and will be so necessarily remembered at the end. And additionally, his insistence that his center is going to present a broad range of theatrical productions, conventions, that again, diversity of theater will be cultivated by him. I thought it's such an important issue and something that we need to remember as scholars, as critics, as practitioners, that this diversity of theatrical practices, visions of the world is something of value. Thank you very much. That's more or less what I of course, I would like to speak for longer, but this is something that I would like to concisely summarize with.
Thank you, thank you. We all have the temptation to speak for a bit longer, but this is exactly what we must control in the context of an online event. And I'm grateful to you, Thomas, for really keeping it brief and intense at the same time. I'd like now to invite somebody who I think should share some thoughts about the process of teaching theater today in view of all these transformations of what it means to be an actor, a director, a playwright, a producer, a musician, and everything else. I'm talking about my friend Jason Hale, who is an American now living in Turkey and teaching at Bilkent University, where he has dynamized the programs in theater and has created a network that I think is exciting for the students to experience and benefit from. So Jason, a few thoughts about how to teach theater in the context of the ever-changing nature of this art form.
Well, thank you, Octavian. I want to thank you and congratulate you for this wonderful conference. It's filled with so much hope here. It makes me feel less alone. It's nice to see familiar faces, and it's nice to see new ones and hear your voices. But overall, the conference gave me a lot of hope. Of course, this has been very challenging in this time. Last spring, the pandemic really reached Turkey in about mid-March, and everything was closed. Universities had to go online. And we felt, what are we going to do? How are we going to teach acting? How are we going to teach fencing? How are we going to teach dance? How are we going to teach movement? And it reminds me of Yaroslav's analogy yesterday in his keynote. He mentioned the Count of Monte Cristo. And when Edmund was in prison and he had this great need to write the history of France, right? But he didn't have a pen, he didn't have paper. He found alternative ways, but he still did it. And that was the challenge that we were faced as pracademics, and I love that word, Octavian, pracademic. How are we going to do this? How can we think outside the box? How can we teach acting without doing scene work? So we turned it into monologue work, using the same work that we would do with scene work, but doing it solo. Of course, some of the work we couldn't do, fencing, for example. We had to kind of put that on hold and said that we would make up for it in the back end. So last semester, spring semester was very challenging. But getting to a more hopeful place, Bilkent University is one of the only universities in Turkey that has face-to-face education. So all of our practice-based courses now are face-to-face. So the students kind of went from feeling like the bird in The Caged Bird by Maya Angelou to being more free now that they're able to come face-to-face with their teachers. We're also able to rehearse productions. Of course, we're doing all this with the safety measures. You know, mask wearing, teachers are wearing shields, but we're going through a rehearsal process of directing plays. We feel like the process is more important than the result anyway. So we're going to go through with that, do full sets, lights, costumes, just for our students to be able to have that pedagogical experience. So that's the current state of where we're at. Of course, we all know that there is eventually light at the end of the tunnel, but we're all in this together. And we all have to keep thinking creatively and keep thinking outside the box. Octavian, thank you so much again. And I want to say one thing about Octavian. Octavian is one of the greatest connectors in the World Theater. And I just met him very briefly because he was on his way quickly to a festival in Shanghai. And he looked at me as he was leaving the room and he said, "I'll be in touch with you." And you were in touch with me, Octavian. And I want to thank you so much for inviting me to be a committee member of this conference. And I want to congratulate and thank all of the speakers. It was wonderful. You nourished my soul hearing all of you. Thank you.
I am speechless, Jason. Thank you very much. Thank you for your wonderful words about me, which I don't really deserve. I believe everything we do is based on shared values and trust, but maybe more significantly on a sense of human affinity, without which theater criticism, scholarship, and the actual experience of making it can become very dry. We are together because we believe in the same values, but we are together because we have something in common at a deeply personal level. And whenever I invite people to an event, whenever I try to encourage dialogue of any sort, this is the starting point. So thank you, Jason, for responding so promptly and so genuinely to my invitation to join the board of this conference. Thank you for coming to Sibiu Festival. Thank you for bringing your students whenever that will be possible again. And thank you for teaching theater in a way that is natural and that favors creativity and talent without burying it through a series of techniques and methods that are ultimately relevant. What you do comes from your heart and comes from your beliefs. And that's why you are a great teacher, and your students, I know for a fact, love you. So thank you once again. And now I'm going to invite another friend whom I met exactly when and where I met Jason, which is to say in Shanghai for an event organized by the ITI. And I leave that detail for the very end. But right now, I'd like to ask Ricardo Abad, professor, scholar, playwright, director, this and that and many other things from Manila, Philippines, to say a few words to us from the point of view of somebody who covers such a wide spectrum of creative possibilities in theater. Ricardo, thank you for staying with us after more than 3 hours, patiently.
Thank you very much, Octavian. And I hope everybody will fight sleep and listen for the next 5 minutes in this conference. With such a cascade of insights and amazing work that we have heard today. And I myself personally am involved now in a kind of thinking stage of a production. There are 2 of us teachers and 2 students. And together we are trying to think of a way to have a production by May. And in the process of discussion, we find that we are not only sort of playwrights, but also directors and actors and designers and stuff like that. The kinds of this and that that we all talk about. But you know, being this and that, this multitasking that Thomas says, is something that has been there all the time. Many of us, from the experience of many, from Plamen in Bulgaria and from the other people, are multitaskers. They have been doing many different roles in the theater even before the pandemic. So this movement to this and that now is something that is not always new. What may be new is that many people are now, the speed and the number of people doing this and that and this multitasking is much larger now than it was before. And that may be, and the other thing is that when they do this multitasking, we are now confined to the digital world. I mean, that is a kind of our relationship now. So it is kind of multitasking, but now with a great focus. And that's maybe one of the big difference. And I'd like to go back to the first talk of Alexandra about identity. And this is the idea that when we have different roles, we are, in a sense, transforming our identity as theater makers. But sociology tells us that The identity is not simply a personal thing. You just don't say, I will be this and that, and my identity is formed. Identity is also a social thing. It is something that people must bestow on you. In other words, if I am an actor, a director, a playwright, and a producer, that identity will only be validated if other people see the work and recognize it as a good work and say, yes, you are a good theater artist. And therefore your identity as a theater artist with all these new roles is validated and justified. Okay? And that's where partly where the critics come, actually. Because partly where the critics is just to simply validate the identities that we artists who create do and perform. So identity is very social. The other thing, it is social because if I have different roles, I can only exercise those roles if, one, I have some sort of resources to do so. You know, our friend Tadeus is able to do many things, partly because he is known, he has resources, he can get collaborating with contacts. All right, there's some element of power involved there. So people who do multitasking and multitask well are people who have resources and some sort of power to engage in this multitasking and perhaps be recognized by others as such. So that's very important, the notion of power. And our example from Felix in Hong Kong even says that how can a theater maker be recognized as a theater maker in his multitasking way if there's a state that censors his work, if there's a state that may eliminate his work at all. So that's another aspect. So what I want to stress is that in this and that is not a personal thing altogether. It is a very social thing. It's a political thing. It's an economic thing. All right. And when we talk about multitasking, we have to deal with many of these kinds of constraints and conditions. And maybe the critic will help us understand all these forces that make sense. Where's the job of the critic? To show the big picture, to show where we're going. Because we all, the artists, live in their own islands, in their own production. It's the critics who look at it from the outside and says, and sees the whole panorama of activities. One more point before I end this thing. The point I want to make is that when we focus online, one of the things that the sociology of media talks about is that the advent of television and movies and the internet has made image the dominant form and not words. Theater is an immediate art. You see it live. Therefore, we don't see images, right? We see live persons acting. Now, if we do online work, it's images that we see. And therefore, we might be in the same trap that many of our television media, internet things talk about. All right. Some commentators talk about authentic and inauthentic cultures. And it says that theater is more authentic because you see it live. The other mediated forms are inauthentic because you kind of see it in terms of images. And when the images dominate, you have some form of, I forget the technical term, now it skips my head, but a kind of overemphasizing on the images. All right, maybe you remember the term. Now, as we go through the pandemic, and as we create these online forms, and there are many, many forms, now the explosion of creativity is amazing, and we see some examples of the work, all right? But it's still on the mediated image form, and which means it is probably kind of on the inauthentic culture side. But, what I discovered tonight from the work of Nasim and from the work of Tadeus, they are trying to kind of push the edge of online performance and make it, in a sense, more interactive, more people involved, more unmediated, by opening up the internet to people who will come in. For example, like in Hong Kong, bringing cats and things, all of these things, you are trying to destroy the online format. You're trying to destroy a kind of format that is something that movies will not do and television will not do, but it's something that theater will do. And so perhaps if we experiment most in those forms, then we can probably break this whole thing about us being more in the inauthentic stage of simply relying on images to communicate with our words. When we communicate with the whole body, when we communicate with ourselves exposed on stage, this is our best form of communication. And we don't like to lose that authenticity in this pandemic. So I applaud these efforts now of some of our artists to slowly break that barrier. And slowly, even performances outside, they're having bubbles on stage, there are bubbles on the audience seats, many, many experiments trying to reconnect us to this online immediate world. And I think our theater critics will be in a position to do that, to track us, to monitor us, to tell us where we're going, to give us that direction. And that direction is, let us deal with the immediate. Let us live up to theater's original roots. So we're not going back to like the past. We're going back to the past because the past, they had no online safety distancing problems. We're talking about the past in terms of simply connecting again. And this is what I want to talk about, the idea of finding our roots, finding our original purpose, and sticking to that through all the myriads of creativity and pathways that are available to us, and getting recognized for it, and getting much support for it, so 1,000 theater flowers will bloom. Thank you very much, Jay, of inviting me, Octavian. And I know Tobias Biancone is here, so I want to say hello and pay my respects to my dear friend Tobias. Thank you very much, Octavian.
Thank you, thank you. I think you deserve a big round of applause, my dear friend Ricardo, for your energy, for the richness of your ideas, and for actually clarifying so many themes that have been introduced and adding a lot more. I am amazed by the level of your energy, so much so that I'm almost tempted to tell everybody your age, because they will be absolutely shocked that somebody who is of a certain age can display and maintain this incredible excitement when it comes to theater, ideas, and dialogue. And I think what you have mentioned at the end really is essential, because the two key options for everybody to ponder today are these ones: going back or going forward. Going back to whatever theater was before the pandemic, or going forward with all these options, possibilities, and strategies that have been brought about by necessity by the context we live in. And this is indeed something that involves a great deal of personal choice, but also responsibility. Thank you so much, Ricardo.
Thank you very much.
For mentioning a name that I deliberately saved for the end. And I admire the patience with which he has watched and witnessed everything happening in the 2 sessions of our conference. I'm talking about someone whom I really have the privilege of being able to call my friend, Tobias Biancone. I consider him to be truly and truthfully the greatest connector of the world of theater. He's Director General of the International Theatre Institute, UNESCO, and he is always open to proposals and suggestions and projects that have theater at their heart. I would like to ask him to say something at the very end of our conference, not before I express my sincere and profound gratitude for everything that he has offered in relation to this event and many others, and for giving the world community of theater makers and spectators that much needed sense of hope. Tobias Biancone, thank you, and please grace us with a few thoughts coming from your heart and your mind as a poet, as a cultural curator, and as a connector.
Thank you very much, Octavian, for your nice words. And thanks a lot to everybody. I was really planned to just pop up yesterday, and then I was caught by the excellent choice of people who were speaking yesterday and today. So I decided, okay, I stay here today. And I said, Octavian, yes, I stay the next day as well. So it's really an excellent experience. It's very well done. Like whatever you have contributed enriched my life, because I could see so much creative process in it, so much, like even when somebody talks about fears, etc., I could see, I never knew that the critics have so much problems with being accepted. Like, so I could see a lot of things, theater makers and critics and poets and everybody share with each other. And when I hear the word multitasking, I know my partners say I'm not a multitasker, so this is not for me. So when I hear, I more think about, that's one thing I would like to say, it's roles that we play. Like we play the role of a father, we played the role of a son. We have so many roles to play. And what I try to do is, when I write a poem, I try to be a professional poet. And if I try to direct ITI, then I would like to be a good and professional director. So I try to do my job, what I do, in a professional way. So we play a lot of roles. And this brings me to theater, like basically to play a role, you can learn when you are taught to be an actor. And I think this is one of my protests I have, that acting is not part of the curriculum of every school. And something I really would like to push ahead, that people learn how to act in the school, because they would understand others much better if they are playing the villain or the king or the slave or whatever. They understand other people. So this is one thing I would like to say. And I think when I look at what I heard, there were two things. No, there were several things which were important. Audience, like Konstantin talked about audience. The audience is extremely important. Like in ITI, we have such a program called How to Bring Theater to the People and How to Include the People in Theater. So this is an extremely important thing to do. And I have seen, I give you one example, one story. The Italian Center of ITI is in Lecce. This is in the south of Italy. So it's warm. And when we are freezing in Switzerland, where I am now, they still can go out and play outside. So what they did during the pandemic, they were allowed to do shows in a circular ruin, like in the ruin of an amphitheater. And they were, like they had, I think 2 weeks full house, like people could sit outside. They need to have a little bit distance, but it was a big hit for the people. And we need to bring the theater to the people. And you who are critics, you are key players in that, how to bring the theater to the people, how to, you may even consult the playwrights, the actors, the theater, what they should do, how to bring the theater to the people. And there were two instances I was also listening and I was thinking, this is very important. You see, like we live in a world of nationalism. We have to be true about that. National attitudes come over everywhere. Like everybody says, oh, we are the best, we are the chosen country or whatever. And which is not true. Like no country is chosen. Like they are a group of a lot of people, and they should be proud of their country. But if the government is okay, but they are part of this world. And I think ITI is a world organization, and we are really always looking what happens in the world. And I think it's very important that now, when you are kind of a prison, do something for using this nationalistic effort, like the book that Trubochkin Dimitri showed, or like the book that Lauma Melena showed. These are tools that we should use to bring mutual understanding and peace to this world. And we have now another enemy, but the enemy is this small virus who nobody has seen. But when we still should work for peace. And I think this is our mission in the International Theatre Institute, to bring people together, despite if somebody is from Hong Kong, from Taiwan, from China, from wherever. Like what I experience in all my attitude, if I look at people who are artists, if I look at people who are working in the field of the performing arts, you can get along with them. Most of them, people I know in ITI, are also my friends. So it's possible to have mutual understanding and respect for the values that we all share. And I think, don't forget that. And you as critics and you as artists, be part of a movement to make people aware that culture is important, that the performing arts are important, that theater is important. We live in a very anti-culture world. We have to be aware of that, and we need to make culture more important in the lives of politicians. And we need to bring the politicians, the opinion leaders, and the people from prisons to the theater. We need to do everything to make people aware of the value of culture, of the value of the performing arts, of the value of the human values that we all share. So thank you, Octavian, for organizing this. Thank you, Bernice, for co-organizing it. It's a pleasure to be with you. Take care, stay healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tobias. What you have said is greatly appreciated by all of us, I'm sure. And I echo your thoughts. Love, peace, and that sense of never abandon hope. But I'd like to dwell on one idea that you have expressed so elegantly in your speech, and that is theater as a way of apprehending otherness. All these virtues are made possible by the fact that in theater and in talking about theater, we can discover, understand, and listen to one another. So I hope genuinely that this was another opportunity to do so. And I couldn't feel more grateful to every single speaker, to every single participant, to every single member of the organizing team. I'm not going to mention them all because there's no more time for that. But I'd like them to know, each and everyone, that I am most grateful to them. The team in Cebu, the team in Hong Kong, the team of ITI, and everyone else. But above and beyond all this, I'd like to thank the audience, but not in a general abstract sense, but the audience as individuals who have tuned in and have stayed with us throughout these 2 days of what I consider to be a historical event. It is made possible by them. It is not only for them. It is with and thanks to their contribution that this will leave a trace. And I hope it will leave an enduring trace in their souls and in their consciousness. So thank you, everybody. And let's keep hoping and let's keep dreaming together and separately, because this is the message that the world needs right now from us and from theater. Hope, faith, and love, the three cardinal virtues of one religion that go beyond the borders of any religion. So thank you very much, everybody. And let's hope that this dialogue will lead to another dialogue and to another one, because talking to each other and listening to each other are absolutely crucial to the survival of theater, arts, and culture. Thank you very, very much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.